So sorry. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So let me just look at my script. Sorry about that. Yes, I wanted to welcome everybody in the room and online. And Sinead, could you please read out the housekeeping notice?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of your nearest assigned available fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the front car park of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of this meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do we have any apologies for this meeting?
Yes, so we have apologies from Mark Saxby, Councillor Philip Broadhead, Councillor Bobby Dove and Elliot Prentice, our Youth Parliament member.
Thank you very much. And do we have any substitute members?
Yes, thank you. So we have Councillor Toby Slade is substituting for Councillor Bobby Dove, and we have Ruth Simpkins substituting for Elliot Prentice.
Thank you very much, and they are both welcome. So moving on to any declarations of interest. So if any committee member has any declaration, please let me know now. Councillor Bull.
Thank you. Just to let you know, I have a family member with an EHCP.
Thank you. Any others? No, I can't see any other indication, but if anybody does realise later on in the meeting at a particular item that they have an interest that they need to declare, please just declare it at that moment. We're going for first names, aren't we? Oliver.
Just a quick one. It may not come up at all, but my partner is a psychologist in CAMS. So if this conversation does go into that side of things, there we go.
Thank you. Better to be safe than sorry. Thank you very much. Right, so moving to 4, we have the minutes, the confirmation of the minutes. Can I take it that the minutes are accepted as a true and accurate record? If there are any, are you indicating? No. If there are any amendments, any revisions? No, in that case, can I take it that they are agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the action sheet, and I realise I'm not in the right place. There we go. So I just wanted to say to the committee, we have an action sheet that obviously records the actions for this committee, so things are recorded and don't get lost. But I'm aware that there are some quite old items on there. And I want to put, so first of all, are there any comments on the action sheet from any committee members? No. In that case, my comment is that if the committee would like, I'd be happy to take this away and see if I could just sort of tidy it up a bit. If the committee is agreeable to that. By that, I simply mean understanding what is in hand and at what stage things are at, and taking things off that have been completed, that kind of thing. Would that be acceptable? Thank you. Okay, is that okay? Mm-hmm. Marvellous. Right, so moving on from the action sheet, we come to public issues. So we've received 3, oh, I'm so sorry. Sinead, what have we received?
Thank you. We've received 3 public questions from Mr. Sofianos. If you want to come up and read your questions, just that one over there. Thank you. And then Councillor Burton will respond.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Question 1. The SEND scorecard reveals a significant change in the SEND workforce between May and September this year. Agency workers rose from 16% to almost 27% of the team. Permanent case officers in post fell from 56% to 38%. And the proportion of EHCPs having a change of case officer in September soared to 30%. This comes as PCT member parents have been advised directly by parent carers together, but not by the council itself, that case officer teams have been restructured. What are the causes of these changes, and how will the council reassure parents and inform them all moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Alan. These figures are due to the SEND restructures staff changes, which is now being implemented and is part of our wider improvement work. This is a significant planned change to the system involving the reallocation of over 4,000 children and case allocation structure and teams. Many of these changes are a direct response to requests by our Parent Carers Together and Parent Carers Foundation forums for new posts in the system. Example, a co-production officer, education inclusion officer to support families and in settings when no access is given. This is to ensure more caseworkers so that the service can support children and families' needs better. This evidence that we are committed to co-production and working together better. Throughout the summer, we have shared these plans with PCT schools, wider settings, and to ensure that families are aware of these changes. Unfortunately, as expected, the two parent care forums, we have current systems limits, which means that we cannot do this automatically for all our parents. To this end, we have reached out to partnerships with Parent Carers Together and Parent Carers Forum to help disseminate this change and to ask parents to access the local office site to find who their new case officer is. We recognise that our system needs to improve, and this will be addressed in the future system development work.
Okay, thank you. Question 2 is on agenda item 9, which is alternative provision. AP settings have a mixed record. A recent national survey found that in 2022-23, AP pupils missed a staggering 42% of sessions overall. 38% of pupils missed 50% or more sessions. AP pupils travelled almost 3 times as far to school as their mainstream peers, almost 9 kilometres on average. 25% of these live more than 10 kilometres from the setting. And although by law, 100% of excluded pupils should be placed with an AP within 6 school days, the national success rate remains far lower. So what is the current overall rate for APs within BCP? For sessions missed, for pupil distance travelled, and for pupils allocated places within 6 school days of exclusion? Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for your second question. In relation to the part I and II of your question, I'm not able to provide a response in the short space of time before the ONS committee takes place today. The MIT team is working on this data area for me, and we would like to provide further updates to the next ONS committee once this information is clear, if that's okay with you, Chair. In relation to element part III, part 3, in June of 2024, it was reported that a 1.3% of children, that's 1 out of 77, who had experienced a permanent exclusion were allocated within 6 days. From March 24, a task and finish group was in place to understand the systemic issues causing this poor performance, led through our improvement work in education. This position identified that this was due to delays in the commissioning process in arranging placements and not having an online tuition element able to provide appropriate education while an in-person placement was arranged, as this is the practice of many other local authorities. Urgent remedial action was put into place from this point to address the delays and lack of online tuition. Positively, as a result of the academic year of 24-25, currently 68% of pupils who have experienced a permanent exclusion have been allocated within the 6 days of the exclusion. This is 15 out of 22 children and represents a significant improvement from the 1.3%. For the 7 children who have not been allocated within 7 days, this has been due to them either being too young to access the online provision or not being able to access the online provision. While this figure represents a significant improvement from previous performance, BCP will continue to work to improve the system to ensure that all children are able to receive provision within the 6 days time limit. This will include further improving commissioning process and ensuring sufficiency of provision available to be able to allocate places to children in a timely manner.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Sofianos, just before you come in, I'll just say, because for the record, because the microphone didn't come to me, so the camera didn't come to me, that I was agreeing that once we'll establish what the data is that needs to come to the next committee meeting. And if I ask Democratic Services to capture that as an action, we'll make sure it comes to the next committee meeting.
Thank you. Question 3 is also on alternative provision. The child testimonies in this paper are heartbreaking. Many speak of their struggles in hostile or unsupportive environments, particularly for SEND children, such as one child placed in isolation for wearing the wrong socks. This follows recent media stories featuring local schools, a girl suspended for leaving a lesson to use the toilet during a heavy period flow, a boy isolated for a week for having a short haircut. Across BCP in 2022-23, 53% of all permanent exclusions were given by just 6 schools. Suspension rates are similarly skewed. Some schools appear to use isolation as a tool, others don't. High control settings are a barrier to inclusion. What is the council doing to challenge the way some schools design and apply their internal rules? And how will it interrogate and address the rise in suspensions and exclusions across BCP? Thank you.
Thank you for your third question, Adam. BCP Council has inclusion and belonging as one of its highest priorities. BCP already challenges schools on non-inclusive practice, including working proactively with them to avoid exclusions wherever possible. In addition, a new co-produced belonging strategy will be launched as part of the suite of strategies before Christmas that emphasises the importance of children and young people having that sense of belonging in their school setting and the impact that this has on their outcomes. Moving forward, a new information sharing agreement is currently being signed up to by all schools to enable transparent and open sharing of school level data in relation to exclusions, suspensions, attendance and the like, to enable constructive but challenging conversations to happen between BCP and all schools in relation to their performance in this area. This transparency and ability to openly interrogate data with all schools in the room together will enable BCP to lead the challenge and discussion and also enable peer challenge between schools, with their data open for them all to see and challenge, a position we have not previously had in BCP. Alongside this, the final proposals for the use of the 2.8 million Inclusion Innovation Fund will be discussed at Schools Forum in January 25. Once approved, this will create increased capacity for BCP to support and challenge mainstream schools with their systemic practice and approaches to inclusion. Inclusion consultants, which are known as ICONs, will be assigned to schools and will provide support, guidance and challenge to their schools in relation to their SEND systems in schools and how they provide support to their pupils. This fund will also provide future training to schools and increase the specialist offer of outreach support and boost training from our special schools to provide further expert support and guidance to our mainstream settings on how to support their pupils. Finally, it will also offer schools the opportunity to bid for innovation funding to enable them to put further support in place in their own settings for their cohort of children with SEND. Schools will be invited to bid for this funding once the fund has been signed off by the Schools Forum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sofianos. Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. We've also received a statement from Susan Stockwell. If you'd like to come forward to read your statement.
Agenda 13, Work Plan. Could the work plan please include the following? Ensuring suitable emergency accommodation is available when police make place of safety orders for people under 18 soliciting for sex in a public place who cannot be returned home because this would place them in danger and cannot be charged with soliciting because of their age. Sorry, is the camera on me? Right.
Yes,
okay.
it will be at the microphone directs the camera.
Oh, I see. Ensuring the work of the LADO, LADO, includes investigating licensed sex establishments which pose a risk of harm to children. The sex establishment licensing regime does not include a safety of children requirement. Although entry to premises is forbidden to children, marketing through websites and window displays will reach children. And case law also says that they will risk attracting people of dubious morals into an area, so putting children at risk.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stockwell. So thank you very much for that. So this is actually something that's been asked for agenda item 13 to be considered alongside the work plan. So I'm slightly in the committee's hands as to what you want me to do with that. We could come back to it when we come to item 13. Would you like me to park it up until then? Yep, okay. Please remind me. Please remind me, somebody, that it's got to come back into agenda item 13. Thank you very much. Okay. So thank you very much for those questions and statement. We move on to our regular update from the members of our Youth Parliament. And we have Ryan and Ruth with us today. I will hand over to them. I'm hoping that they've figured out who's speaking first. And please do share your recent work with the committee.
Hello, good evening. We'd just like to firstly thank you for this time to provide you guys with an update on what we've been doing. I think it's good to definitely keep us in check. So back in September, for my campaign, which is knife crime, back in September there was the knife crime event in Bournemouth, which I saw a couple of councillors at, which was nice. I was attending, and it was a good opportunity for me to interview some people, get some good public relations, and also I was able to see Cam's grandma, which was good to see her in person. And then later on, me and my fellow MIP Elliot went to the annual conference in October, which was an amazing opportunity, and we were able to see other MYPs, like-minded MYPs that were also doing a campaign, and it was a good opportunity to network with a lot of other MYPs and see what their campaign's about and how they've done their campaigns and how we can put that into ours. And we also formulated quite a lot of valuable debates between us, which was definitely interesting. Debates that were relevant to our campaigns, which, in my opinion, further strengthened our opinions and helped us to better understand the problems as a whole. And as an outcome, Elliot was able to pass forward one of his policies that he really wanted to pass about his finance, specifically the student loans, which was, yeah, a very good outcome. And it helped also formulate ideas for the for our campaigns in the future and the next steps, what we're going to do. So in terms of next steps for me, I'm trying to plan sort of a sports event in the sense of creating some community between the people and the police, and also spread awareness for knife crime as a whole. I think that's the main thing that I want to take forward into my campaign. But obviously now I'm trying to figure out the practicality of it and how I'm going to bring that forward, and also plan to do the stop and search, which I think was good for, which is in December. And Ruth.
Yep, so hello everyone. I'm filling in with Elliot today, so some of you may not recognise me. It's nice to be here. So I'm just going to give you a quick update on my personal campaign, which is on homelessness, which I think is also, it's a good time, especially now it's getting into the colder months and it is becoming a lot of a concern within the council, I know. So far, I have done some brief work with a couple of charities. So I did a kind of conference with Homewards, specifically on youth homelessness and kind of accommodations for people who are looking to kind of find housing and what support they would need. That was really interesting, really great that I could be part of that. I'm looking to do some work with Night Stop. Many of you likely have heard of them, yeah. So tomorrow I've got a meeting with someone from that charity, and that will hopefully lead to me being part of the board meeting in January. So that's quite exciting. As a whole, we've all been meeting with MYPs. That's what we've been doing the past couple of months. So we've managed to collectively, at least one of us has met with every single one of the local MPs of the BCP area. Mostly in person as well, so we think we found that very productive. Discussing campaigns, ideas, future steps, where we could possibly do some work together. We've also had some impact with that on questions that have gone through the parliamentary centre. So there was a question asked about the funding for Youth Parliament, just to see where that would be going, and we haven't had any confirmation about that, but it's nice to know that we're having some influence on the questions being asked and having some answers, so that's quite exciting. Back towards homelessness, I did want to ask actually the committee whether the board could ensure that a portion of the £200,000 funding that's being attributed to homelessness to help over the colder months, as we all know, maybe what portion would be going to the youth. The rates of youth homelessness, as we all know, are increasing, and it is obviously very worrying at this time. And I was wondering if some of that would be going towards specifically youth funding, because something that I've learned is that the younger people need perhaps quite a bit more support in that situation. Do I have a bit of time left as well? Just going to mention the other deputy, MYP Lily. well, me, her, and Elliot, we're working together on a mental health campaign as well. And where we are with that, we are looking at CAMS MHST resources. We're evaluating those. They are about teaching teachers about how to handle mental health. That's where we've decided to come into it from. So educating every teacher in a school to be able to notice and address signs of struggle is something that we all agreed was perhaps where some schools were falling short. And hopefully looking in the future to take some training in order to receive testimonials from past students on their experiences with that issue. And that's all I had about that. Thank you. Any questions?
Marvellous. I was about to say exactly the same thing. Any questions or comments? And also we need to pick up on your question, which we will come back to. Emily.
Thank you. I'm Emily. Thank you so much for the update. It's just more of an offer of help. Ryan, you mentioned the sports event that you sort of are looking to organise and plan. And if you do need any help with logistics or just talking that through with people, I'm sure there's quite a few people sat here who would love to support and help you, including myself. So please do reach out and use us as a resource for things like that.
Ryan, make sure you take them up on the offer.
Yeah, thank you. I've had quite a few meetings recently with people from BCP about the practicality and if it's actually possible to do. Yeah, I'll definitely get in touch with you guys. Yeah.
Perhaps if people could actually offer to Ryan, people who, you know, on the committee who are able to offer some help or guidance in that, that might be a bit easier than him. Or you could send out an email to all of us and we could reply to that. Thank you. I'm coming to Oliver next. No, it was David. Sorry, I forgot who put the hand up over there. So sorry, David.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Fantastic update from both of you. Really pertinent, important points, right? Mental health, homelessness, knife crime. And I was lucky enough to attend the knife crime event. Brilliant. Ryan, I know it was your birthday the night before. So it's good to see you looking fresh-faced and supported by your media team as we spoke about last time that were following around. But no, in all seriousness, a great event. I know that a number in the room that were there as well. Lots of different engaging activities going on, from the skate parks to the music to the dance, is all sorts. And you also mentioned Tracy. I was lucky enough to meet Tracy, Cam's grandmother as well, and his brother as well, which I found really powerful and really interesting to hear, you know, what they're doing and how they're raising awareness as well. So really key points. Again, I'll echo Emily's points, here to support, even if that's just to attend. Love to know what's going on as well. And yeah, Sophie, again, homelessness. Even in my ward today, I've got a rough sleeper that I'm looking at, you know, a sleeping bag and a shoddy looking tent, and it's getting super cold, right? So yeah, really important points. But no, thank you for your passion, your energy. We love having you here and listening to what's going on, because remember when you were elected, and we're now a number of months on, and you really settled in brilliantly. So thank you. Well done.
Certainly echo that. Peter, over to you.
I kind of echo the sentiments of the others. Thank you for the work that you're doing. A couple of ones in terms of the knife crime and stuff. You probably already answered this. It's about engaging with kind of youth workers or activists that are kind of doing programs of work with young people around how to avoid situations or to deal with situations. I'd be interested in if there's any of that going on in youth hubs across the conurbation, and if not, how we can promote that and work together to support you in that. In terms of the homelessness, are you targeting sort of young people in particular, or is it the generic emergency situation that we have across the BCP? I was just wondering if there's any specific work with young people, like coming out of care straight into homelessness and stuff like that. And if we can be of any help whatsoever in putting you in contact with people like Roots to Roots in Poole, for instance, who are doing a lot of really good work with homeless people, then, you know, we're here to open those doors, if you like, or help you knock on them, maybe walk through with you or your support staff. So yeah, but thanks for your commitment. And I will finish on I've been invited onto a group with the National Youth Agency, and they are discussing about, you know, the fact that there wasn't a youth offer in the manifesto of the Labour government, but there are other things that are going on that will begin to filter out. And the National Youth Agency are trying to work to see how they can secure the future, but it's very difficult because it's all about money. But thank you. The more you do, the more you become. So.
The more you do, the more you become. Oh, my goodness. We've got full Councillor Cooper already this evening. Thank you very much. Olivia, over to you.
Hi, thank you again. It's so lovely to have you here. I think we're really privileged to have your voice here, and it's really important. Specifically regarding the mental health work in schools, I'm a teacher, so it's something that's really important to me. If you need any inroads to anywhere, we also, few of us do secondary school youth surgeries. So if you need any kind of help with any of that, just contact us and I'd be more than happy, because I think it's really, really important at the moment. And as we can see from some of the documents that we've looked at tonight, mental health is a big factor in, you know, and barriers to going to school. So it's really, really important. So thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to just come to Richard as portfolio holder, because we had the question around the £200,000 pot. Now, I'm not quite sure, I must confess, I'm not sure what that pot is. Can I pass that to you for a question that could be followed up on?
I don't have an answer straight away, as you can imagine, but I can follow up on that.
Thank you very much. I will capture that. That's wonderful.
And if I may, just because I don't get a chance really to if it's okay, I would echo what the committee has said. You know, again, if anything in your campaigns I can be assistance of, you know, please do also let me know. I know there's a lot of talent over there that can help you out, but if anything specific, please do let me know.
Thank you. I'll come back to you in a second if you want to add anything. I just wanted to say myself, from the knife crime point of view, we need to open a channel around the follow-up work. We have started that, but we'll, with the just for the benefit of the rest of the committee, obviously we have the report in July from the working group that was a while ago. And I've been trying to follow up on that on behalf of the committee, just to make sure that work doesn't get lost. One of the avenues I pursued is with our youth parliament members, so that will be continued. And on homelessness, if you hadn't mentioned Night Stop, I was going to mention it. I'm also on that board, so if there's anything I can do to help with that at all, and otherwise I'll see you in the meeting in January. Do you have anything you'd like to come back on?
Just on the question about youth workers, as I said, like the sports event is a main way I want to take forward my campaign, but I'm also very interested in working with youth workers in schools and children like that, because I know it is a big problem in those areas. But I think, yeah, I think it is definitely one of the things I want to pursue, and I'm very interested in things like that.
Yeah, so to answer your question about what kind of groups of young people, I did begin my campaign just focusing on youth homelessness, and I have sort of broadened my horizons in the look to just kind of help where I can. But I know with Night Stop in particular, they are aiming at age, I think, 16 to 24 or something like that. And I did want to take it in a kind of emergency needs, you know, people out on the street kind of route, especially just for now, as opposed to kind of preventative measures or kind of later help. I was looking specifically at kind of emergency help. And yes, if anybody did have any connections, I'd be extremely thankful if anyone could link me with, you know, any charities. That would just be really good, just to have options. And I would also like to say thank you for the offer of help with the mental health campaign as well.
Right. Any other comments from the committee? Peter, over to you.
Yeah, I forgot to say that I've, as a Hamworthy councillor, I've been in contact with about setting up a youth surgery, and I just wondered, you know, with your support worker, if we could look at how we can plan that out, because I'd much prefer it if young people, you know, if you were listening to young people and I could help facilitate that process. So just knock on the door, because I think that's something that will be able to happen in the near future. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So for now, you can relax. Thank you for that update. It just shows the value, frankly, of Youth Parliament members. The work that you're doing is fantastic. So we come to our main items of business, but before we do that, I wanted to introduce John Coughlin, who is the Department for Education's advisor who works with BCP. I am going to stop there with the introduction because John is here tonight to make a short presentation of, you know, explaining his role and an update on what he's doing with us, and also we'll be happy to take questions after. John, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and thank you, members. One of the other adages that wasn't said earlier is never take the slot after the young people. It's terrible. Anyway, sorry, I'm not young. So as the Chair's explained, I'm John Coughlin. I'm your improvement advisor. I work on behalf of DFE. I've been working with BCP Council on two fronts. I took on the social care role for BCP after the ILACS inspection fail, which was just 3 years ago now, and I started working about 2.5 years ago with Cathy and colleagues, and then 18 months ago I also picked up the SEND brief. So what I propose to do, if it's okay, Chair, and I'm conscious that members, I think there was an agenda glitch. You don't know that I was coming this evening. I'm very happy to say what I've been doing with the authority and how and why, and then take some questions. I'll speak about social care first and stop and take questions. I'll then say a few things about the SEND programme and also take questions there. I'm not able to stay throughout your meeting, and I know you've got a SEND session following that, but I'm sure it'll link in, and I'm also happy to come back in months to come and in case there's further questions to go, and obviously there will be developments as we go forward. So if I just begin by briefly explaining about the social care work. Obviously this is children care, child protection, early help and related. And you'll all know that you had a very difficult inspection 3 years ago, and the context to what I'm saying now is that you'll be aware that you had your Ofsted call for the repeat inspection only yesterday. So Cathy and the team are in all systems go now to prepare for that. The social care intervention was made with what's called a statutory direction, which names me and gives me certain authority in terms of working with the local authority. And there's a separate statutory direction for SEND, but we'll come to that. The inspection was a really grave moment for the services and pointed to a question of the safety of children in the local authority area, and hence the government's concerns. And indeed, my original brief with government was to test the question as to whether or not BCP Council should retain its services or if a trust should be put into consideration. And I recommended no to a trust, and government accepted that just about 2 years ago. And I think that was the right recommendation, and that story has moved on. I think it's fair to say, and Ofsted will signal this, that the improvements since were slow at first, and that there were a range of factors, particularly around staffing and securing better leadership within Cathy's team, that was slow to take traction in BCP. Not necessarily unusual, but it was quite slow at that stage. Progress since then has been much clearer and more evidenced, and that's a very positive signal for Ofsted coming through. That's not just my opinion. I chair an improvement board with partners and with DFE, and particularly with the service leaders. And we know through Ofsted monitoring visits since the last main inspection that you've been developing this narrative of improvement. That those monitoring visits focus upon different areas of the service, but they've been giving a consistent narrative of improvement, which is important. But also we've been doing increasingly intensive work with the support of external support, initially from Hampshire County Council and now from Islington Council. And a lot of that work includes looking at quality assurance of casework, so really drilling into what's happening for individual children. And again, the narrative of that quality assurance work is showing numerically consistent improvement about the quality of the work that's being done. So that's something that's important. And sitting alongside that, we obviously look at the data of the work that goes on. And your data scorecard now is looking really quite healthy and actually representative of quite a strongly performing local authority. But the caveat I'd give to that, particularly as Ofsted are coming down the road, is within children's social care services, the data is very important, but usually it's just about asking questions about what the data is telling you. You've got to be very, very careful not to put too much faith in the data telling the full story. That said, your data is telling a better story than it was telling 3 years ago, and that's important to dwell upon. What that leads us to conclude, and it's a carefully guarded statement, is that certainly I think children, particularly vulnerable children, are much safer in BCP council area than they were at the time of the last Ofsted. We need Ofsted to vouch for that, and they will take an independent view about it. And you can never say children are safe, full stop, in a given area. There's no such, I'm afraid, no such kind of comfort in this work, because things can go wrong, and it's an area needing constant vigilance and constant development. Some of you may be involved in some of the Ofsted process. I won't second guess that. It would be wrong of me to do so, and it would probably curse the process. But I think if the process is well handled and delivered effectively, then I think it will tell quite a radically different story than was told 3 years ago. I think the evidence is there to support that. How that measures out in terms of gradings, it would be wrong of me to try to predict. But we'll have to see where that work goes. The two things I would say about that process for the local authority are, firstly, you have to bear in mind over the next 4 weeks that the department is going to be run ragged. It's a very, very difficult inspection process to service, so just bear with Kathy and her team. But secondly, and I think more importantly going forward, I don't know what the future picture of the improvement offer from DfE will be through somebody like me. But the challenge of improvement in children's social care services is only half about getting over the line and coming out of the category of special measures that you're currently in. The second tougher half is staying out of the category. And in my first public report about the work we've done, I said some, I think, careful and measured things about where the children's services sat within the local authority as it was then. There's been a lot of change, including in the political leadership, and I have a very confident working relationship with the lead member. But making sure that the conditions for continued improvement thrive within the council as a whole is a critical dimension to where you go from here, without second guessing what Ofsted have got to say. I'm going to go on to talk about the work we're doing around SEND, hopefully in similarly relatively brief terms, but I'll stop there, Chair, if that's okay, and take any questions that colleagues may have about the social care work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Yes, apologies for this being introduced at the last minute, but do we have any questions? Peter.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm thinking kind of root causes and root solutions. If you go back and we hopefully we know what the root cause of the failure was for the BCP. Would be interesting to see that on exactly on paper again. And then this pathway we've got to improvement, and what is the root cause of that? I would really like to kind of see that. And in terms of the fiscal framework that we're working within, it's almost like we're pushing a boulder uphill, and that's what we're asking our staff to do. Because as well as trying to come out from the deep drowning waters of being a failed council, which is not getting enough money to deliver the statutory services that we are being asked to deliver, let's park that, but that's a harsh reality, not just for us, local authorities right through the country. So we've got that, and then we're supposed to pull ourselves out. So in terms of the measure about the fiscal framework and the impact it has on our improvement, I would like to see some work done on that. Well, you can't do this because you haven't got the money to do it. Oh yeah, we want to improve that, but actually we need to improve that more because that's got more of a heavy weight in the statutory duty that we've got to deliver. So it's that kind of stuff. And as enthusiastic as I am about people coming in to reinvent, to rebirth the successful work of children's services and social care, that fiscal restraint has to be torn apart and analysed, and some future projections put forward to say, well, actually, this is what you actually need. I go back to the 70s when Derek Hatton.
Peter, I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, of course.
Could we wrap up into the question?
Yeah, we could, you know, set an illegal budget and we can do whatever we want to do, but we can't do that. So those are the complex, but it was thrown onto us, you know, it's like, this is like a bath bomb for my brain, I tell you. So there you go.
Never been called a bath bomb for the brain before, but that's a good one. I'll hold on to that. Absolutely, absolutely. So more seriously, and in summary terms, the report, the first report I did as a diagnostics report, contains much of that analysis. I think it's personal, relatively subjective, but I personally still think fairly secure. I think that, like every authority that gets into a category of improvement, it's a complicated route in, and it's a hard route out. Included in your challenges were not local government reorganisation per se, because local government reorganisation happens, but the way in which local government reorganisation happened here, and as it happened at that time, probably needing to have the right people in the right place at that time to keep the focus upon the fragility of children's social care. And that focus was lost by the council collectively at the time. I'm pretty clear about that, and I don't point a finger of blame for that, but I think it was a factor. I think the pandemic happening after you'd reorganised was really, really bad timing. If there can ever be good timing for a pandemic, happening as you're reorganising was a problem. And you then had some issues of the quality of leadership at a number of different tiers within the system. You also had, in my opinion, and I have a good working relationship with your chief executive, but I think at that time of local government reorganisation, there was a particular focus upon corporate systems, quite properly and quite necessarily, but that focus again contributed, I think, to perhaps a lack of attention to the service delivery dimensions of the responsibility of the council. Getting that balance right is terribly hard on every local authority. So those things were there. Now, obviously, the good news is that a number of those dimensions are very, very historical now. Let's not have another pandemic. Let's not have future local government reorganisation. But you still do need to keep the quality of leadership going, and there is a challenge there about nationally about where the good leaders are. I think you've got some very good internal leadership now, and that's making a huge difference, and sustaining that as you go forward is a case in point. I take the point you're making about the funding, and I'm not here for dear feet, but I understand that relationship. I'm not going to try and wriggle out of it, but I think there's a couple of things you need to think carefully about as a council. Firstly, you need to segregate the funding challenges you've definitely got on SEND, which link into your high needs block challenge. Secondly, you've actually got to recognise and be a bit, proud of yourselves. Kathy will always argue for more resources. That's part of her job. But actually, you have put better resource into the service during the period concerned. And that's been properly done and in a systemic and base level. So to me, the funding feels more secure. I don't want to sound churlish about the funding case, because what we know is that successful children's social care services are cheaper to run than failing children's social care services, and you're coping with that, or the back end of that still at this stage. Knowing what we know about children's social care costs nationally, particularly the costs of external placements, and knowing what we know about the pressures upon council budgets generally, one of the other issues I try to reinforce as we go forward, it's not my job to manage your money for you, but I always worry about councils that think more about how do I get more resource than they think about how do I do the best with the resource that I've got, which is not a statement to say be grateful and go away, but it is a statement that says, as an industry, children's social care can be inclined to lose focus upon efficient and effective management of resources. Now, I think the efficient and effective management of resources in BCP is better now than it was 3 years ago, and I think that's important and creditable. But you've still got what most authorities have is this really challenging issue to do with the market in children's social care services. And in fairness, DfE are moving quickly on that, or trying to move quickly on that at this stage. The SEND issue we'll come to in just a moment, where I think you have got really more difficult and almost intractable problems, and I acknowledge that. But so I think given that the problems around children's social care funding are national, I think the questions you have to ask yourselves is, why are some authorities consistently very good indeed at children's social care with comparable funding levels? And what can you do to compete in that way with those authorities, particularly now, because you are actually a large relative local authority? I worry about smaller authorities when they get into difficulty. And one of the other dimensions to your challenges is that very quietly, some of the precursor authorities in children's social services were really quite struggling anyway when they came together. That contributed to it. And the small authorities, that's difficult. You're quite large now. You've got some capacity and you've got some ballast, which is really important in delivering children's social care services, not to say that the problems are solved by any stretch of the imagination.
Thank you. Oliver.
Just two quick questions. Are there any rumours going around the DfE about the statutory override for the dedicated school grant being extended at all?
Terrible answer. Great question. Terrible answer. I don't know.
And then you mentioned that some authorities are doing a really, really good job nationally. Do you tend to find that those authorities outsource a lot of their requirements, or do they own a lot of the services that they provide?
I think that's a really interesting question, and I've got a bias in my answer to that question. I worry about authorities that in social care terms, whether adults or children. Personally, I worry. This is not a DfE statement here. Where they describe themselves as, inverted commas, commissioning authorities. I come from a background of direct provision, but I believe that the best models internally in local authorities include a mixed economy of provision. My simple response to that is that I think the skill of commissioning is dependent upon expertise in delivery. And I think the further away authorities come from any involvement at all in direct delivery, the less skillful they become at commissioning. And they almost start to try to outsource elements of their commissioning, and it becomes perverse. This is my opinion. I don't think that there's a direct analysis of performance against that point. I'd love to see it. I think the balance in BCP is a reasonably strong. I'm not worried in those terms, but I do have a view, for example, that authorities which don't have, I hesitate to say this, I'm not steering your policy, but I think the national challenge, let me put it like this, I think the national challenge around the lack of control in the children's residential care market, and it is a market, and it's a very volatile market. I think that volatility personally has a direct link to the degree to which local authorities no longer do their own looking after children.
Any other questions on the social care side of things before we move on to SEND? Okay, that's your moment to go on to SEND then, please, John.
Thank you. And again, I think you're going to go into a longer item on SEND, and I'm afraid I won't be able to stay for all of it. So you were in a SEND category while in a social care category, and I think and essentially your improvement advisor had to work elsewhere, so we agreed that I'd take that on as well in the middle of 2023, just because to save having a merry-go-round of advisors. What happened then, and it's important for members to be aware of this, and this was, I know, pre your elections this year, so it may not be high on people's radar. But in the middle of that improvement programme, there was so much consternation about the progress that you weren't making as a local authority around SEND that you were placed into an additional statutory direction. And so you've now got the honour of having 2 children's statutory directions, which is it's an important point to dwell upon as members in the leadership of the services. And that particularly followed a moment last summer 23, this is, where it was clear to DfE and NHS England, bearing in mind that this is a joint inspection framework, that there wasn't enough progress generally being made, and there were some important signals about, if anything, potential deterioration. One of those signals being with regard to the relationship into the schools community and BCP, which I think is interesting with regard to the colleague's question earlier on about the profile of some of the exclusive behaviours that you've got within BCP, which I do think is an important profile to be dwelt upon. The other thing, though, to say about the statutory direction, which is important for, I think, this committee to be aware of, is it was a twofold prompt for the government to say we needed another statutory direction, as in there were equivalent concerns about health support for SEND in BCP council area. But unfortunately, we then discovered going down the road that there's not an equivalent mechanism to parallel the statutory direction upon the local authority to work on the integrated care system. That's a point to be taken away. And some of us have tried to take that point away in terms of these services improvement. So you're carrying the direction through the DfE for the DfE dimension of your SEND services, but the NHS needs to be carrying an equivalent level of account. And we're having those conversations consistently through the improvement board mechanisms. And the ICS and the colleagues that work within the provider services within Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole services, those services that relate to BCP, they're aware of that, but there isn't the equivalent level of oversight. And that's, I think, an interesting issue for us to continue to watch for. The second contextual point, I think it's really important to stress, without making any excuses for the challenges that you've faced and you need to deal with it around SEND in BCP. Firstly, you've got this major structural issue, which is exceptional here about your high needs block spend. And that's a historical problem, which essentially the council owns, but it has inherited in terms of it being a reflection of very poor service management at the beginning of this journey some 3, 4, 5 years ago. But I know that's a major millstone around the neck of the council going forward. Secondly, and I think government have acknowledged this, the previous government acknowledged it latterly, the SEND system in England is severely challenged. It's not just the BCP problem. Now, the risk there is you say the BCP issues are just national issues and what can we do about it? You can do better, and that is starting to happen now. But there does need to be a substantial piece of reform work around the SEND system nationally, because the 2014 legislative changes are positive on lots of levels, but they've struggled to make the impact that was intended. And that includes going back to the funding issues that we talked about before with regard to SEND. I know that the council is rightly very worried about how it manages the high needs block debt and what the solution to that is going to be nationally. And I've tried to support your representations to MHCLG as well as DfE about what can be done about that. And I know that's a really frustrating block for you to be stuck in. But I would ask that we park that for the moment and just talk about some of the other issues that are around. So your SEND progress was more so than your social care progress, slow at the start of the improvement journey and stayed slow and was quite resistant to change early on because some of the problems were quite deep set and quite dug in, and also because the council internally lacked some of the quality of leadership that's been required to make a move on this. That situation has improved markedly, and the council's making really substantial inroads particularly on that which is within the council's direct control. And I know in the item that's coming, you're going to look at more detail at the data. I would just say from my perspective that there is valid cause for confidence in the way in which your systems and services are improving. And I know a question was raised earlier, it's not my job to answer that question, about some of those organisational changes that are going forward. I have got, from where I sit, a high level of confidence in the leadership of those changes and the impact that I think that they will make, particularly in the assessment side of that key interface between the parent and the authority, which I know is a hugely frustrating issue, but I've confidence in the way in which that's being taken forward. Obviously, the devil will be in the detail and the proof of the pudding and such like. But I think that stability is coming forward, including on casework. Again, as with social care, you now have substantially improving data. As with social care, the data is important but not definitive. And I know that Sharon and Kathy will talk to you more about that later on. You also have, I think, what's really important, but very much a work in progress, from what I think was a dangerously stalled position. You've got a developing relationship with your community of schools, becoming more consistent and frank and honest and engaged than I think it was. And I think actually the schools complain when the council blames stuff on local government reorganisation. They think it's a get out clause. I think, though, that the relationship between schools and local government in BCP council area, coming as it did at the point of pandemic and at the point where the fruition of various things around academisation and the continuing changing of the role of the local authority with regard to schools, but the local authority still is, in my opinion, a local educational authority. Those changes coming together were very disruptive to the work around SEND in BCP. You're making real inroads in terms of that relationship now, and I think that there is, across schools, a developing confidence and recognition of the role of the local authority, which I think had been badly damaged a couple of years ago. I was quite shocked in some of the meetings I attended early last year. That's being much, much better led now, and you've got good cause for optimism in those terms. But I would point you back to the question that was raised earlier. You've got some very, very differential practice and performance across schools. Every local authority has nowadays. How you get at that in BCP is, I think, one of your challenges going forward. But you're in a position now where you can do that with more confidence, because partners such as schools were right to be very dismissive of what you were saying a couple of years ago, because they couldn't see how to gain access to change and improvement. Finally, in those terms, there are good people working within the ICS and the ICB to deliver improvements within SEND services. But there is that challenge that I alluded to earlier about where the authority of improvement sits within the NHS, generally around SEND, and getting at that locally is an issue. I'll go so far as to say, and they know that I think this, that I think there's an issue in the geography of NHS Dorset and the ICS about where the conurbation, the coastal conurbation, sits in the mindset of the Dorset ICS. And the terminology says some of that. We have good and robust conversations, but they need to continue because there are issues to do with waiting times in particular, and how to develop more effective joint working for earlier intervention with the confidence of parents that need lots of work. We don't know when you're going to get re-inspected. When you get re-inspected, it will be a joint inspection again. And there are examples of those inspections being difficult for local authorities, not because of the performance of the local authority, but because of the performance of partners, which is why we must work collectively. We have a good partnership board for the SEND improvement work, but it needs constant support and drive and direction. Richard knows about that and contributes directly and effectively. But it is difficult, challenging work everywhere. Doing it here alongside that issue of your high needs block puts a particular dimension to it, and we've got to work collectively on it going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And I just wanted to say that it's been on my mind for some time. I'm aware that we don't have a health representative on this committee. We certainly don't have their ongoing participation, and it's something I am conscious of and working on to change. Emily, you have a question.
Thank you, Sharon. Can I say, John, it's really lovely to have you in the room because we see your name in lots of things. It's lovely to put a face to a name. What I wanted to ask you about or hear a bit more on is when you talk about confidence of parents and carers, because it strikes me we get a lot of reports, we see the data, we see things numerically are improving, as you mentioned earlier when you were talking about social care. We see that, yet anecdotally, when we're talking to our residents, when we're speaking to families, we don't have that same confidence in things improving. And I wonder, from your point of view, do you feel satisfied the council are doing enough in that particular realm? What could they be doing more? What would you advise? I don't know if you could comment in a bit more detail on that particular area.
I think it's a very good and extremely important question, but I think the answer is quite complicated. So I think if you go to an evidentially high-performing area on SEND, you'll easily find lots of very, very disgruntled parents, because the best performing areas are working with parents who are on a journey on behalf of their children, who feel that they have to constantly fight with the authorities, and that won't necessarily be so very different in those authorities that are high performing. One of the flaws, arguably, about the 2014 reforms were that they quite properly put a strong emphasis upon parental voice, arguably not quite such a strong emphasis on the voice of the child, but they didn't match that emphasis around resourcing and capacity. And that's why you see things like the ridiculous rate of tribunal successes, in inverted commas, on behalf of parents, because the system on one level is tilted to the parent now, but the local authority in particular can't match that tilt with resources and funding. That's not a message of despair, it's just challenging everywhere. I think we have parent carer representatives at the improvement board, and we try to engage with them properly. You've got an interesting issue locally that you've got two parent carer voices or groups of voices. That's not something I feel like I should intervene with, but I'm not always sure it's best on behalf of that voice. Arguably, it's better than having one, but that's a feature of BCP going forward. I think, and interestingly enough, we're doing some specific work through the board in the next couple of weeks exactly on this point. The concept of co-production in SEND is a much more mature one than I think in other parts of children's services, including children's social care services. So we're doing some work in the next couple of weeks about co-production as a board to make sure our own skills are pushed up a bit, including people like me who are much more administrators now. So I think that's really helpful. I think what you need to develop, and I know that the director and her colleagues would agree with this, but it's a real challenge, is what you can't do is solve all of the problems, but having systems where there is more confidence that questions will be answered. It's simple stuff like the speed of response and the frankness of response, and also trying to make sure that the system, i.e. the local authority, the school and the NHS worker, are speaking with relatively one voice, so, and giving a sense that the parent is working with a system that understands itself. Those things all help, but I don't think there's a panacea.
Thank you. Happy with that answer, Emily? Yeah. Thank you. Peter.
Just a quick one, I promise. In terms of the billion that the new government are saying they're going to push forward into SEND, I just wondered whether you've heard any noise about how that might manifest itself in provision and local authority. You know, where is that money going to go? What noises have you heard, and what would the projection be for the future, if you like? Thank you.
Again, I'm afraid my simple answer is I don't know. My assumption is it's going to go through the direct schools grant again towards the high needs block, to support in those terms. But you'd like to think as well that there'd be some imagination placed around how you can use it, because it's a cliche, but like other areas of service, the more resource and activity you can get earlier on in the child's journey, before you slip into parents wanting what some of my colleagues I think quite accurately call the currency of diagnosis and the currency of a statement or an assessment, then the more of that the better. But I don't know exactly yet. I think you can gauge probably quite accurately how much will come into the area, but how it gets directed, I don't know.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Yeah, no. Okay, sorry, are you looking? No, you're not. No. In that case, I think all that's left for me is to thank you very much for coming along. It is hugely appreciated. As my colleague said, it's great to have you in the room. And we hope to welcome you back in a few months' time, perhaps.
I'd be very happy to come again, Chairman.
Thank you.
I'll leave now if that's okay, so you can go.
Yes, indeed. We'll ensure it next time. Thank you. Right, so we're going to back onto our agenda with the items of business. And we have 3 substantive items, which are all essentially linked. But we're going to launch this section with the SEND improvement update. And that's over to Sharon, who's been waiting very patiently, and it's appreciated, and she's on our screen.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of team members with me to support the question. So your paper in front of you with attachments gives an overview of our progress over the last 12 months, which builds on the comments that John's just made. I'll take the paper as read. I suppose from a highlight point of view, as John's demonstrated, you can see a significant performance improvement both in our 6-week timeliness, our 20-week timeliness, our progress around historic annual reviews that were delayed, and a general improvement in our processes and efficiency. The paper also talks around our SEND improvement plan, and there's a copy of that within your documents that has the 8 priority areas that I've spoken to the committee about before. We continue to make very good progress in that, and the restructure is a significant change for us. So over the last year, we've been working at it to improve the system, but we hadn't made the step change in terms of form and function within the SEND service. I'm delighted to say that we've now, through having gone through quite a protracted consultation process with staff and colleagues, we've now launched that system just this side of half term. Mary Diffie, who's on the call, is our head of SEND assessment and review, and she leads the team of people that support in-year assessments and annual review processes. A big part of our development and listening to staff, listening to managers such as Mary, but schools and parents and carers and our parent and carer forums, one of the fundamental matters we needed to address that I had inherited a SEND service that was quite homogenous. We weren't co-locating teams or cohorts of children to deliver the best services. So a key aspect of our restructure has done 2 things. One is in the assessment and review part of the system, that is where we look after those new assessments in the system and the statutory annual review for children in the system, of which there are now over 4,000. We had teams that were homogenous, and it just doesn't work well. So we've identified, listening to staff, listening to schools, we now have a system of pods. So we have an early years and primary pod, we have a secondary pod, and we have a post-16 pod. What that means is that we're able to work with our teams in actually making them specialist in supporting the SEND journey for our children in each of those pods. Alongside that, as previously mentioned by Councillor Burton, we listen to the feedback from our parents and carer forums in terms of the work that we need to do around what happens to a child when there is a no to assess. There was a clear recognition and request that we have some dedicated processes and staff to support parents when they're in that situation. I'm delighted to tell you that we've listened to that, and that now is a post that we have in our restructure. Accordingly, there was a request for some focused co-production staff to actually make sure that we were listening to the lived experience of our children and incorporating that into our work. So we now have a dedicated co-production post. As previously mentioned, that has meant a disruption in our staff stability indicators. The other aspect, which is aligned to the agency question earlier, listening to our staff and looking at our workforce stability over the previous years, we recognised that we needed a new post, which is an assistant case officer, that would help support our ongoing annual review timeliness, but also provide a career pathway. So when case officers do move on, that we've actually got a workforce development strand of officers that can then step into that case officer role. So positively, each of the pods now have those posts, and we will be, I think Mary has been interviewing last week, and new officers will join those posts in January. What that means from January onwards is that we will have more or less a fully populated SEND structure with new pathways. We've also looked at our taking care of today is how I described Mary's team, and then we have another head of SEND strategic function, which looks at our ordinary available provisions, the work that we do with schools, our education psychology service, our quality assurance systems. And as John's just alluded to, really building on, now that we've got our process and timeliness working well, we need to make sure that we continue to improve the quality of our plans, how we co-produce plans with parents, and also how we support those settings and children that can be supported in the universal space before a plan. So the report gives you an overview of that. It also details the financial outturn, which was subject to a cabinet paper, and John has just previously spoken to that. So a positive report. I hope you can appreciate and see the improvements that we are making, and will continue to make. And our absolute focus now is on driving quality and improvement. I do need to point out that we still have an alarming number of new assessments coming into the system. So October last year, we had 36 assessments. This year, it's 85. So we are seeing year on year an 18% increase in the number of children in the system. And I would like to point out that alongside our very continued and sustained improvement, we're doing that with the same resource envelope of staff that we had before. So it's just a testament to Mary and the team and others who have worked really hard to make the efficiencies and systems development areas where we can. Colleagues are on the call to support questions. So I'll pass back to you, Chair, for any questions in the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for that very comprehensive elaboration, in fact. So I am in the hands of the committee. I'm open now to questions and comments. I'm going to start with Emily.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you also, Sharon. I have a question regarding the table 2.5. The percentage of parent carer requests has gone up 10% in the space of a year. I just want to, number one, check I'm reading that correctly, and number two, ask why you think that is.
I'll give a quick view and then I'll pass to Mary. It can fluctuate, and it will fluctuate depending on the time of year. So we have been keeping a close eye on that. It was in the low 20s at the end of last academic year. Just sometimes happen in August and September as children are transitioning and schools aren't around. I think in October it's now about 45%. So we're keeping an eye on that. We would hope that that will tail down as children are in their settings working with their schools. Mary, would you like to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I think anecdotally, the feedback that we get from some parents is that they are frustrated with waiting for schools to submit requests for assessment to us. So we're doing a deep dive into the data at the moment, just to understand if that is coming from certain settings, and whether there's any sort of work we can do with those settings to ensure that staff are skilled up in when's the time to submit a request to us. Another thing we're doing across the assessment and review side of the service is ensuring that our case officers are having a minimum of a termly planning meeting with all of the settings that they are allocated to. That will allow them to work with those settings to look at those children who are who potentially need to come to our attention and who we may wish to undertake assessment with, so that we are taking a more proactive approach to that, and are also able to identify those who we need to initiate assessment with as a priority. So we're hoping that will help to reduce that number, but also instill some confidence across our parents and carers that we are doing that piece of work with schools.
if I can come back, I wonder, do you might not know off the top of your heads, but I'd be interested to know the relationship between the percentage that then get granted, where those children go on to have and young people get granted an EHCP when the request comes from an education setting versus comes from a parent or carer. Is that something you can answer?
It's a really good question. I think through the deep dive that Mary's just identified, we can look at that. So we'll pick that up. I don't think we know the answer off the top of our heads today, but I think it's something that Mary can and should, and we can explore and look back. Obviously, from our perspective, we want where children are in settings to work through their provider, but I think we could have a look at that and then bring that back at the next update and share any findings. I think the key issue that Mary's just talked about through our SEND restructure, we've looked at where are the places and spaces that we can work better together. John alluded to our relationship with schools, which wasn't always as strong as we would have liked it to be. So part of our offer now is those termly meetings. And that's not just to talk about the children that have a plan, it's to talk about those children who maybe are in that SEND support space. How do our ed psychology team, how does Chris's school inclusion team support those children so that we're having that earlier conversation. We're also, of course, thinking about that in the early years space, and particularly thinking about those children that transition from nursery to reception, and how can we better support those parents through that process. In the improvement plan, you'll notice that I'm very proud of our Dingley's Promise, which I know was queried last time round at Scrutiny. That is launching, that is working well, and we're looking to expand that to do that early intervention, early support where we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just if I've got one other question, if that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Is that all right?
Just one more.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand a bit more about the locality events, like something I'm very passionate about. I'm sure you've probably picked up on from previous scrutiny committees, is the relationship that we have with parents and carers, and how as a council doing so much more. So it feels like this locality event was a way of doing that. So I just want to understand a bit more about it. It says it was really successful. How do we know we were inviting everyone who might have wanted to come, like reaching all of the people who could have benefited from this event and whose voices we want to be hearing in order to help continue this improvement service? So if you could just give me a little bit more info on that, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll give a quick overview and then I'll pass to perhaps Mary and Tanya and Chris, who were all involved in these. So these were originated as a direct request from colleagues in BCP Alliance, where they fed back to Kathy and myself in a meeting, I can't remember when, some point last year, this year maybe, that there was a requirement and request for locality Bournemouth Christchurch pool events. So obviously in the grand scheme of the various bits we were doing, we got to it. It's also linked to our co-production officer, as I mentioned before, so we have a dedicated post now that can do this. So we work with the Parent and Carer Forum, Parent Carers Together, through our school system. So we have Senko briefings, we have breakfast head teacher meetings every 3 weeks, and we communicated as far as wide through the local offer and through our networks that these events were happening. We also had an online event, a virtual event, to ensure that parents and carers that got very busy life also have the opportunity to engage in that. And now I'm just going to quickly pass over to perhaps Mary, Chris or Tanya in terms of what we did, how we did it. Importantly, now we have our dedicated officer. We will be running them again in January and March, and then we'll set a sort of pattern and frequency that parents are happy with. One more thing to say is alongside that, through our new SEND structure, we have some dedicated posts. So we have some AP, alternative provision posts. I've talked about our education inclusion officer that working with families where we've said a no to assess. And we have a PFA, preparation for adulthood, engagement officer. So outside of those locality events, again, through listening to our parents carers associations, we've absolutely put in additional posts within the existing budget in order to best support our families, and we've also looked to manage and hold our caseloads down. Mary, Chris, Tanya, would you like to just comment briefly from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So the focus of the events was about an introduction to the senior leadership team across the Education and Skills Directorate, but also to give an update on all of our improvement work so far, our new structure, the key people within the new SEND structure. And it was also to talk about some of our future plans around our sufficiency work and our statutory obligations, which we've talked about at length tonight. We also gave the opportunity for parents and carers to tell us what was most important to them, so that we could take that back and make sure our future sessions cover those areas. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive for all of those events, and they were all slightly different. Some of them felt really informal, and we sat around and just had tea and biscuits and talked about various different things. Others we followed quite a more formal presentation sort of format, and the feedback even from families where our service hasn't been good enough previously was positive, in that they appreciated the opportunity to meet with us in person and to talk through the work that we're doing and understand that, and to also talk through some of the really tricky challenges that we've had that we've talked about tonight, and how together we can overcome those. So I think moving forward they will be really positive. The more we can do to publicise them, the better. We did get good numbers compared to previous events that we've run, but seeing even more people there would be really good for those future events as well.
Yeah, I think just to add to that from my perspective as well, I think this is the seed of a really strong beginning in this area for us now in terms of growth with this. I think a lot of work with our families will be through word of mouth as well. And I think we will see parents there that have been at those events for us, speaking to other people in the school, speaking to other people that they know through their friends, and we will see bigger attendances moving through with each of them as they go through much more regularity. I think, as Mary said as well, they were very contextual, each event. We kind of adapted them to the group of people that were there with us and adapted the conversations accordingly to that, which I think was really positive and really helped as well. And again, we can do that in the sessions going forwards. You know, we can focus in on key themes or issues that might want to be discussed in that particular point in time, and just really be responsive. I think the whole premise of You Said We Did is really important in this arena as well. So the feedback that we've taken from this we'll use as well to improve the next ones as they come round as well, and really bear that in mind.
Anything further to add on that from Tanya? Anything? No.
No, I think Chris
It's all
and Mary
covered.
has covered it. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you. Emily, are you happy with that?
I was going to ask one further quick question, but I don't want to take up too much. It's a very good one. It is.
Okay, then let's have it.
It's just to say, you saying about sort of wanting to do future events and hopefully word of mouth, they'll increase in attendance. How many people did we have coming to these events on average? Just because it's sort of saying they were overwhelmingly positive feedback. If we had 3 people, it's quite a small sample.
Yeah, so our pool event had the highest turnout, and I think we had about 32 people, I want to say, but I'm saying that off the top of my head. We can certainly check the numbers for you. Some of the other events, the other 2 in-person events, one of them we probably had about between 10 and 12 people, and another of them was lower, probably about 5, and then our online event, we had quite a good turnout. I couldn't tell you the number, but it's probably similar to the number that we had for the pool event.
Thank you very much for that. I think it was a comprehensive answer. I'm actually coming to Sandra next, because, or is it a follow-on from that? Okay, as it's relevant to, I'll go to Olivia first and then Sandra.
Sorry, Sandra. Would it be appropriate or possible for us as committee members to attend something like that, just to make sure in the round that, you know, then we wouldn't have to ask you these questions. We could kind of be on board and see what's happening. Obviously, hopefully we wouldn't all turn up at once and intimidate everybody, but for me it would be really beneficial to see how they work and how that kind of that relationship's working, and it would be really beneficial, I think.
I think in an observing capacity, I think that would be fine, as long as the numbers are such that that would make sense to do that. So we can have a look at how best to do that.
Yeah, perhaps some form of coordination. So as you say, we don't all turn up to the same one.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sandra.
Thank you, Chair.
Could I just ask you, was this the event at the Lighthouse? Was that a separate?
No, we were at the Spire for the pool event.
Spire, okay. Right here, it's in relation with what Emily was asking. I was jotting down notes, so when Emily actually raised that question, I was thinking, right, I need to reply. So where I've written down for the NHS ICS and looked it up, it says integrated care systems improve health and care services with focus on prevention, better outcomes and reducing health inequalities. Well, I'm going to flip that and say that with schools saying about ECHPs, you know what I'm talking about, yeah. Whereas Emily did say schools taking longer to submit requests and parental requests being put in. I'm going to say anecdotally, but I do know of an issue where schools are saying, am I allowed to say this? I'll say it, I'll say it. Schools are saying it is quicker for parents to submit. So I'm then going to flip it again to say about a school's scorecard where you actually drill down data from schools, as in which schools have applied, how they've had their responses, how many parents have been, can I say the word, told to submit their assessment, and how many parents are therefore then, it's not jumping the queue because you've all got to get into that queue. But if you are sidestepping, waiting for schools to submit, because yet again, I've written down here as well, got lots of arrows going on. It's costing more for the outcomes rather than go back to the prevention bit, because lots of schools are picking up from what previous schools have missed or not been able to manage for whatever reason. So in a roundabout question is, you're saying you're in contact with schools. What is the crux of schools actually committing and confirming how they?
So I think earlier on we wanted more granularity around some of the data that was being presented, to understand about the the differentiation around either schools putting in EHCP requests or parents putting in
Because
EHCP
also,
requests.
can I just say this as well? So when you're choosing a school, transition from junior to secondary, and it's called parental preference, lots of parents will say, well, I need to know about their SEND. I've been told this is a trauma-informed school. And then you get there and you find out, no, they're not.
Okay.
So it's that clarity so that parents have the confidence of not being.
Let's see what, as it were, is possible off the top of your heads. And then it may be that you need to come back with more information.
Yeah, so part of the work that we do is looking at, particularly now with our new structure, what's happening across the school system. We have data looking at the number of the penetration of children with SEND support, the number of children EHCPs in schools. There's a whole plethora of metrics that we look at. And through that, we identify those schools and their particular profile, where we can see those that have a high level of SEND support, a high level of EHCP, and we look at their number of referrals that they place in, so including those that are made by parents. So we absolutely look at that. We referred to earlier in the Belonging and Inclusion Strategy, Councillor Burton talked about our information sharing agreement that we're asking all of our schools to sign up with. The idea around that is then we share that profile, we share that data, and we have those conversations across the system about those schools and their behavioural patterns around referrals, parental engagement, SEND support, etc. So we are absolutely now moving into that space to understand the who, the what, the where, the why in each of the locality areas, because obviously our demographics play a part in that. We're also looking at the relationship between academy trusts and maintained schools, etc., so we can absolutely understand what's happening in the system. So we will be able to bring something back on that once we have that information sharing agreement in place, but we can talk broadly around that. But please rest assured that now that we into our post-recovery phase with our new structure, we will be absolutely focusing on school activity and locality activity.
Thank you very much, and it would be interesting to see more data on that. No, you asked your question, didn't you, Peter?
Most things
I was
have been
coming to you
covered.
anyway, really.
Thank you. Yeah, most things have been covered, but this one in terms of the participation engagement of children, young people and their families, and then the the data that comes from that. Are you collating that kind of together and then going to produce something that we can sort of read about the lived experience of, say, young people going through the system? That would be really nice to do, although it might be an extra bit of work. And then the other thing is, in terms of the schools, it's really good that you're beginning to improve and schools are coming together, hopefully, albeit really difficult under the academisation of our schools. Is there any way that we could get a collective definition of success between the schools? Is it timely to pull the heads around a table and say, well, this is where we're at, and for us to improve, we need us to work collaboratively right across the conurbation in terms of how we deal, because we move children miles away, so just something about a collective definition of success which people sign up to. Might be a pipe dream, but that would be nice.
Two answers to that very quickly. I'm aware of time. So absolutely quite right, Peter. In terms of, we have a new, alongside the work we have been doing, we have a new quality assurance framework, which puts into place systems to understand the lived experience of our children at the various places and spaces that they access our services. So again, linked to our new restructure, we have a revised quality assurance function and colleagues in that. So again, we can bring that as we develop those processes. In terms of the collective endeavour to improve inclusivity and engagement across the school sector, Kathy and I have been working on, alongside DfE and school leaders, launching an education partnership board, where we absolutely do that and agree that as a local system, what are KPIs for working together and for success measures for the wider SEND system. That work is underway, and I'm sure that we can bring that back later on in the academic year once that partnership board is launched.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? I have a couple, if I may. The first one is, it seems that, am I right in thinking this is essentially a sort of a bulge has been created in assisted provision because of the increased processing of EHCPs? And if I am right in that assumption, do you have a sort of a timeline on that bulge? Do you know when that moves through, or does it just keep growing?
Do you mean alternative provision? Sorry, I wasn't quite sure what the question was.
Did I say alternative provision in there? Did I say assisted? I keep doing that. I'm so sorry. I meant alternative provision. I apologise. Yes.
I think should we pick that one up when we get to the AP paper, Chris, if that's all right? Because I think there's a section there that talks about what's happening in the system. So I think the short answer is we are seeing about 13.5% of our children with EHCPs are accessing alternative provision. That's more than we would like, and Tanya's working very hard on our sufficiency strategy, which I'm sure will come to this panel board at some point. But yes, that has happened, but actually it's incumbent upon all of us to try and keep all of our children in mainstream education where we can, and we would seek to reduce that. But I think Chris can probably pick that up when he talks through his programme of work.
Yeah, sorry, I asked it because it was I took it from the higher needs part. So that's where I took that from. My other thing actually does come from our attainment paper, but I'm bringing it in here because it's about EHCPs, and it's just very quickly. It says in the attainment paper that those within in EHCP aren't well served by our sixth forms, and I just wondered if that was something that we could address here rather than in the attainment paper later on, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, so our sufficiency strategy work that Tanya's leading is absolutely, and again, back to our pod specialists, so we now have a post-16 team. I should mention that we've weighted the caseloads depending on the profile of need for those children. So we are looking at that now. How do we particularly think about year 9, that onward provision? And Tanya and colleagues have been engaging with FE colleges, but also we've had some schools in the conurbation come forward to say they'd like to understand and explore that. So that's an item that is in development. We do know we need to do more. And again, I don't want to put Tanya on the spot, but at some point we can bring progress of that work to, but it is absolutely in our line of sight now.
Thank you very much. So that moves, oh, I think that's all for questions. Is that correct? No, we have one more from Olivia. Apologies.
With regard to the backlog of annual reviews, is there, I don't know if I've missed it in the document, sorry, is there a timeline that you've got for that? Because I know we had a timeline in place for EHCPs that there was a backlog of.
Yeah, so just to inform committee that we have the historic backlog that we had this time last year, we have moved through. So we do have, as you can see from the data, a cohort of children that we need. So they have had their annual review. What we haven't done is process the paperwork to the extent that we would wish to do so. We've had, working through Mary and the team, a diagnostic that's looked at our business support arrangements. So some of it wasn't in the SEND service, it was in the business support service. We've worked really well as a team to understand that. The implementation of the new structure means that our assistant post that I've mentioned earlier will be additional resource through the changes of our resource structure to administer our annual reviews in a more timely fashion. Plus we've identified some process review issues. We've had end-to-end process review around that. So we still have a backlog at this point in time. It's not the backlog that we talked about previously that has been cleared. Mary and the team meet on a weekly basis. Mary, could you just quickly give an overview in terms of when we think we'll get through it, and just to advise officers as to when it might be that we could bring it back? Sorry, members.
Yeah, so just to sort of go over the steps that we're taking as well, just you've mentioned some of them already, but we've kind of increased the oversight of managers with regards to annual review backlog, and they are meeting weekly with all case officers to prioritise vulnerable groups to ensure that we haven't got any of those annual reviews in that backlog. As Sharon referred to, we're just getting to the end of an end-to-end review of the whole annual review process, which is actually far more complex as a process than you could ever imagine for various reasons, not least that there's several key deadlines for the local authority for every child, for every annual review. We intend to have a new draft process for that whole process by Christmas, and we'll be making contact with our parent carer groups this week to work through that with them. Alongside that will be some further workforce development. As Sharon's already mentioned, we've now recruited to all of our assistant case officer posts, which were the real key posts within our new structure for addressing the annual review backlog. They will be in post from the 6th of January, and really helpfully, 3 of those are already experienced business support officers within our service, so they will come already able to do a lot of that role, which means I would expect them to hit the ground running really, and I would hope that we would be in a far better position by March with that backlog as a result. We've also done some further training with our case officers around being able to issue final EHC plans themselves, whereas before they've relied on business support to do that step of the process. So there are things underway already that will address some of that, and that will improve in the new year when we have those posts in place. We have also offered overtime to our business support officers to address the backlog, and we have Power BI in development we've now got a version for EHC NAs, and we're doing the same for annual reviews, which is going to enable us to far more easily monitor the data for those annual reviews, and again move to a much more proactive space. And then longer term, annual review process will feature heavily in our workforce development plan as well, to make sure that we don't ever move back to a position where we are accruing a backlog.
Thank you very much. I feel them. Oh no, you were just saying thank you, right? David.
Yeah, I'm just off the back of that. You know, a lot of reports that we've heard over the course of the many meetings we've had, for me, some areas between the relationships between our young people, parents, carers, and the caseworkers, case officers, that consistency, that trust, that sense of not having to have someone else take over, retelling their story, re-establishing that trust is a real key area I think stands out, and it actually linked to, I think, reviews in the sense that, which you've just talked about around, I know there's been feedback around that with changes and in staffing and caseworkers, actually, that some parents I know felt that their reviews haven't necessarily been handled most effectively, and actually thinking about sixth form or post 16 opportunities around insufficient focus on creating that clear pathway and support for those young people going into adulthood. Really, I think that I just want to touch upon that and link that to my question, which is, we think about the continual change, the pressures on staffing, the reduction in permanent case officers, the increase in agency staff. Are we in sort of a perpetual cycle with this? Are we in danger of these relationships, trust, etc., consistency, impacting the improved momentum that we've heard here tonight around a lot of the good work that's already happened? Is this kind of an unintended consequence or a consequence of what could be coming over the hill? Is it something that catches us by surprise?
No, so I think this is a point in time, and this is a very purposeful, intentional redesign, and the disruption that we've had to put in the systems around that. We will be using less agency officers or fewer agency officers, and as I've mentioned, where we've seen the high use of agency has been in our case officer cohort, where we haven't had that junior role to place permanent staff through the local authority system structure. So I am confident through the work that we've done and through Mary's leadership that we will have a much more stable service than we've had for many years, and we've created career pathways in the new structure as well, so that those case officers that want to move on to other areas have a broader set of opportunities to retain staff within the service. So it is a purposeful design. It isn't a reactive design, and it absolutely puts in place the foundations that we have needed for quite some time in order to stabilise the service. Mary, would you like to just add anything else? Again, mindful of time.
Yeah, I think it's just really worth pointing out that the agency staffing that we have in the service now are predominantly there to provide a handover to permanent staff that we have recruited within the restructure. So those new staff started on the 4th of November, and we've purposefully allowed a short handover period to ensure that there is that smooth transition with caseloads and that consistency. I think we've currently got one vacancy left to fill in the case officer layer of the structure, and we will then be in a position where we have a permanent workforce. So I think we're in a really good place. I think we have been in the place you've described previously, but I feel that we're absolutely coming out the other side of that now with the work that we've done.
Okay, thank you for that. So not a question, just a point. I look forward to the success that comes from this, and I look forward to seeing it play out and hearing it playing out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that took a little bit of time, and we are behind, let's face it, but I think that was an excellent look at that paper, and I appreciate everybody's input. I don't know if you're all staying on screen. If anyone is leaving, I want to thank you. But if you're staying, then obviously you are welcome. So we move on now to the Linwood Special School SEND post-16 provision. And I'm in Tanya's hands for this. But before I pass over, just to say that any committee members who if you want to go anywhere near the contents of Appendix 1, obviously there is some exempt information in there, and we will have to move into exempt session. So just give me due warning. Thank you. Tanya.
Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone. Yes, this is the Linwood Special School post-16 provision proposed at the Ted Webster, former Ted Webster Centre. I will take it as read that you have had an opportunity, a chance to go through the report, but if I may just draw out a few of the pertinent points within the report. There's been lots of discussion tonight in reference to our SEND improvement plan, but also the role then of sufficiency that that plays within that improvement plan. We know that we've got a legacy of insufficient specialist provision across BCP, and we are at the same time facing significant increased demand. So we've got a huge programme of sufficiency work to deliver on, both in the short, the medium and the longer term. And this proposal that's in front of you very much forms part of that strategic view of and work that we're doing to increase the local availability of places. In particular, this post-16 proposal is interesting because, of course, we're utilising other buildings within the Children's Services estate and repurposing it for education use. Now, why that's interesting is because I think corporately we're getting much better at collectively addressing some of our key priorities, and we've heard that tonight with the update you had from John, with really getting on board with our SEND improvement journey and ensuring that all areas of the council are sort of harnessed, and corporately we're working together as one to then deliver on this agenda. And I think with the Children's Services former Ted Webster Centre, this is enabled through our governance arrangements and through our clear link to the corporate property board, where we're also looking at assets for disposals and the opportunities those assets might bring for expansion in the future. So for now, this Linwood proposal, what it does is it looks at or it's prompted and triggered first and foremost, you'll notice on page 1, a condition issue of the former post-16 accommodation that Linwood School themselves made available some years ago now, but then had to close in recent years because of flooding. So we were charged working with Linwood to see if we could find an alternative site, and the Ted Webster Centre, former Ted Webster Centre, came along at the right opportunity, or the right time, sorry, and provided us with this opportunity. Obviously, we wanted to provide those places that were lost, but also we wanted to really add value and use it as an opportunity to boost the number of post-16 places, and that's entirely in alignment with what we're trying to achieve with our SEND sufficiency strategy, and the draft strategy sort of takes us through what that means in terms of expansion across the age range, early years, primary, secondary and post-16. So it's opportune to add value to the previous number of places that was available, and double it essentially by providing a total of 60 places. The other couple of points I'll draw out, and I'll draw breath for some questions, is really around the level of investment required to get this building up to a good quality standard. The young people clearly deserve that, and we've got standards set out by Department for Education in terms of what our learning environments should look like, and in size and in quality and in finish as well. So we're expecting here a sort of a higher level of refurbishment, renewal of the fittings, mechanical and electrical works. Lots of details there in the report around the acoustic measures and improvements, windows, external doors, all of that. I think it's good value for money. It certainly compares to the EBDOG national benchmark figures. When you compare the cost per place for heavy refurbed schemes, it's very favourable. It's under the average cost per pupil, which is great. And I think the investment that we're going to put in, which is subject to the an exempt appendix, then offers extends the lifetime of this building considerably. So we're looking at this provision as a long-term site, a satellite site of Linwood School. It will open ready for September 2025, and children that currently are enrolled at Linwood, or young people I should say, will have the opportunity then to transfer over to the new site, where that's appropriate and applicable. And of course, this really adds to Linwood's existing post-16 provision, which is currently across the Linwood campus, Summerwood site and Chai with provision in the heart of industry. So this really adds value. It will give an opportunity for the skills centre to expand, and it's really exciting for us, particularly in that preparation for adulthood space. Thanks very much. Doesn't require planning permission. I should have just added that, but we have worked with members of the local community. We did a letter drop. No issues were raised. That there's decent access. It comes off a main road and it's tucked in behind. Last thing, sorry, I will say is that this doesn't operate like a normal school site. Remember, it's post-16. Children won't be on the site for the majority of the time that you would anticipate for a normal school, and this is about young people accessing the provision, but also then accessing placements off-site. Thanks very much.
Excellent summary. Thank you very much, Tanya. I have a question from David.
Not a question, actually, Tanya. Thank you for that. Clearly passionate as you can be in terms of it. I wholeheartedly think the recommendation to fully refurb it, higher standard, is absolutely a no-brainer, if I may say that. Investing in our young people to create the right environment for them to really thrive is again a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. I'll be careful what I say about the appendix. In fact, I probably won't say much about it other than it is what it is, and we can demonstrate the value that you've described there. No brainer, no question, just my point and my view. So thank you for what you're doing, and I really support this.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on this paper, Peter?
I'll back you, David. I think it's really good, but also it's really nice to see that the construction works that the council own the company, Seascape, and that they're employing people, and that's a really good thing. Ciao.
Thank you. Olivia, no? Oh. Emily has a comment.
Just again to agree with my colleagues, I think it's important just to, recognise the work that's been put into this and the value this is going to add to these young people. So I just wanted to have that on record as well. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. I sort of read the paper with a smile on my face. Sandra.
Yeah, I'd just like to say this is an exciting opportunity, and let's go forward.
Marvellous, thank you. In that case, we have a recommendation, and I'm conscious that I didn't actually note the recommendation of the last paper, so I will go back and do that because I'm not a very good chair sometimes. Right, so the recommendation for this paper is that Cabinet approves the scheme. So it is recommended that we say to Cabinet that they approve the scheme to develop a satellite of Linwood School hosted at the former Ted Webster Children's Centre, providing a total of 60 post-16 places, including the associated capital investment necessary to develop the scheme as contained in Appendix 1. The scheme is fully funded from the Council's grant allocation of high needs provision capital and will progress in line with the project programme set out at paragraph 12. Is that a recommendation that this committee supports?
Yes.
Is that unanimous? Thank you. Wonderful. I'm going to reverse a tiny bit, if I may. I will say that the previous recommendation was simply to note, this is for the SEND improvement update, that the committee note the work currently being carried out across the wider partnership within BCP Place for its SEND service. Given the extensive debate that we had, is the committee happy to note that report? Thank you, and apologies for not doing it at the time. Right, I'm now going to try and get the terminology right and say alternative provision. And it is now over to Chris. Thank you very much. Sorry to have kept you for so long. But anyway, you were contributing to a previous item. But yes, if you could present your report, given that we have read it, of course, on alternative provision. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And again, mindful of time, I will take it as read and give you a very brief overview to allow more time for questions rather than me talking. I'm sure after 2 hours people are ready to move on rather than just listen to me carry on for too long. So in summary then, in relation to the alternative provision report, the emphasis around this is to make people aware again that this is part of our SEND inspection framework and part of that wider SEND system. We need to bear that in mind when we talk around alternative provision. In terms of progress and moving along, we now have an alternative provision improvement plan in place, which is appendices to the papers here, and an oversight board, which has been running since June and is chaired by Sharon. And that is part of our governance structure to make sure that we are sticking to the priorities within the plan and moving again our improvements along at pace. Just to highlight a couple of the priority areas, our commissioning aspects have been key for us in relation to alternative provision. Great deal of work done by our commissioning service and teams to move this forward for us, which needs to be recognised. We now have an approved list of compliant providers who have undergone our commissioning checks. And are deemed as such that we now publish that list to our schools as well, which helps them commission alternative provision themselves with more confidence that the quality of the provision that they will be working with is appropriate. Next step on from that, we have discussed with schools and our commissioning team are starting to develop a traded offer for schools to buy in for BCP to actually arrange the alternative provision placements on the school's behalf. We see that as a win-win in relation to the work being taken away from schools having to do that and easing some of their administrative burden. And for us, from our side of things, it gives us greater oversight then in relation to the placements that are being commissioned for our children, and we can be more secure in relation to where it is that they're attending. We've also been working significantly around our processes in relation to alternative provision and making sure that it is a much more seamless and joined up approach to this cohort of young people and children. So that is involving pulling together our elements of school inclusion, SEND and virtual school, particularly in those areas. And as Sharon referenced before as well, we have more staff within the SEND structure now that are particularly referenced to alternative provision work and monitoring those placements. We're due to launch a panel very soon in relation to considering requests for alternative provision that will ensure that all those requests that come in are considered equally and within the appropriate time that they need to be done, so to ensure that we respond effectively and efficiently to those requests for support coming in. The paper also talks and presents to you some data to keep in line with the theme of data that you've had from the various papers this evening. What that does say, Chair, in relation to what you were saying before, is it does show that we have had an increase in numbers certainly over the past year in relation to alternative provision placements. The data shows one of those particular areas is around our key stage 1 and 2 children and a rise particularly percentage wise in that area. Some of that, and I'll say some of that, is as a result of the work that we have done in SEND in resolving some of that backlog that was there and then looking for the appropriate special school placements and they're receiving alternative provision whilst we resolve those placements. I think the other element of it, though, is it's symptomatic for us of what we've also referenced, which is around some of the difficulties we're experiencing in relation to mainstream inclusion at the moment and alternative provision being more historically seen as a destination for children and young people to move on to, rather than the direction that we are taking it now, which is a part of our inclusive system and part of that graduated approach to meeting children and young people's needs. So what we want to see is that alternative provision being much more seen as an intervention and also an opportunity for reintegration as well, that it's not seen as a final destination, but maybe a short-term stay where some more intensive support is provided to enable the young person then to return to their mainstream school setting and thrive in that location instead. And then just to finish off the paperwork, as I say, I won't dwell too long, there is a section there around voice of the child as well, and a piece of work that we did with some of our children and young people who have experienced permanent exclusion and since attended alternative provision. And I think, again, referencing back to what Emily was saying before around the importance of that lived experience of our children and families, it's a really powerful piece, this part of it. I don't think there's any getting away from that. And as was mentioned in the questions at the start as well, it is something that shows us very clearly the difficulties and disappointments that have faced some of our young people through the system and how they've experienced that system. We have worked with that, and we have taken that back already to our head teachers through various forums for discussion and very transparent conversation with them around that as well, because I don't think there can be a more powerful voice than the young person who has been the direct experiencee of that position, if experiencee is indeed a word. But it has started those conversations for us, and we intend to carry on this work, because I think listening to the experience of our children and young people going through that system has to guide us in the right ways, to the right steps to move forwards as well. To the key themes that have come out around that for us as well, it's not just about getting the support right for them, it's actually around relooking at that relational approach that we have for our children and young people, and that sense of belonging that we've talked about before as well. That's part of that clear message that came out there, that for our children to feel like they can succeed, they need to feel like they belong in their setting as well. And again, tying it back into previous, that relates to conversations that we had with some of our families in the locality events as well. One of our parents said, our schools have to get to know our children as children first and foremost before they can become pupils and learners. And again, the relational element is something that we cannot be overstated in this situation. We will revisit this type of approach in listening to our children and young people, and the intention would be to see real progress in how they're talking around their experiences as we move forwards as well. Paper rounds off talking around the high needs and budget position, as does the SEND paper, with the same reference to that paper as well that we've already had as an appendix. And I will pause there, Chair. Thank you for any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I, for one, I'm sure the rest of the committee would be interested to see the outcome of the survey with the voice of the child again at the end of this academic year, to see what comes out of that, and hopefully we'll see some improvement in those comments. Although it's always a difficult period, it's always a difficult thing. Okay, any comments or questions for Chris? Oh, Emily, over to you.
I do, but I was waiting to see if anyone else would go in first, because I'm a bit of a keen bean. Thank you very much, Chris, for sharing this. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say how incredibly upsetting it is reading so many of these comments. And it takes me back. I'm a former teacher, I was a primary school teacher for many years. And one of the things that makes me so incredibly angry is I know the teachers in these situations, and I can't speak for all of them, but I know the vast majority would be absolutely heartbroken to know that these children and young people, this was their experience. Because our school system is so incredibly broken. There is a relentless pursuit of attendance and attainment, and teachers are not allowed, professionals working in schools don't have the freedom to do what they are there to do as professionals, which is nurture each and every child. And I speak from first-hand experience here, and it's the reason I'm not in the classroom today. And it just makes me so incredibly upset, it's not even the word, but I just wanted to share that with everybody, because this is broken and it needs fixing. And I think we all know that, which is why we're here doing what we're doing. From a practical perspective, I wanted to revisit Sofianis's question that he asked a bit earlier on, and just check that I was correct in understanding one of the figures given. So when we're talking about the expectation that children should receive alternative provision within 6 days of being excluded, was I right? And it said March 24, only 1 in 77 children were receiving that. I just wanted to check I hadn't misheard that figure. That is
exactly the figure that I gave, yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. And I note that you said it's now at 68%, obviously going in the right direction, but that's not 100%, which is what we all want it to be. And I just wanted to know what we're doing to help those children and young people access that provision that they need. You know, if we're thinking about inclusion, if it is a case of they don't have the equipment and the technology, what can we do to help them access it? What levers do the council have to ensure that those children, the ones who aren't able to access that provision in that time, what are we doing, basically? Thank you.
Emily, can I be clear? Do you want to direct that to Chris in the first instance, or do you actually want to direct it back to Richard?
I'm happy with anyone who thinks they can give an answer, would be wonderful.
Just pick up just to start.
Chris, Richard wants to come in, and then I will come to you.
Because another bit of which is heartbreaking is, if you remember rightly in my answer, it did say that quite a large number of those children who weren't accessing alternative provision was because they were too young to access the IT, which in itself is a very heartbreaking statement to say. I will allow Chris to finish the answer, but I just thought I would highlight that because I did wince rather when I read it out.
Over to you, Chris, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think, Emily, I think you raise a really good point in relation to this, and I think there's a couple of elements of response to it. I think the first is that we need to note that the online provision is not going to be suitable for all of our children and young people, as you know, age is one of those elements, but it may be that they would struggle through their own complex needs to access something that's online. So we are seeing that as part of the response for those that can access that, whilst we arrange something in the more medium term for them. In relation to those that maybe don't have the equipment to be able to do that, the inclusion team have been working with our Commission and IT teams to ensure that we can actually offer IT equipment to those families to be able to enable that access in the short term whilst we resolve a more face-to-face solution for them. The other aspect, though, in terms of that timeliness of response and how we improve on that, because I completely agree, we should be absolutely aiming for 100% of all children to receive that provision within 6 days. Part of that for us is our sufficiency of our alternative provision that we have at the moment as well, and we are working on that alongside the developments we've had already. So Tanya and myself are working closely with a number of our registered alternative providers to look at how we can increase their capacity to enable us to deliver those spaces in a more timely manner for those children as well. And we anticipate being able to do more in the coming months around that as well. I can see that Sharon wants to come in on the post.
Yeah, absolutely. Over to you, Sharon. Thank you.
Just to build on that, of course, part of our intent is to reduce the number of children that need and require alternative provision through our inclusive approaches in school, through the support, through the education psychology service, through those termly meetings that Mary mentioned previously. So alongside that, when it happens, how do we best support? We're absolutely wanting to be in that space. First and foremost for our children, our families, that we are not reaching that position. And we've obviously, from a primary perspective, really thinking about, so how do we better support? So some of that is particularly around those young children that are transitioning from nursery into reception, year one, etc. So again, part of our Head of SEND strategic side of the service is looking at actually what's happening in places and settings and how do we better support to reduce the need and requirement. So it's both the onward provision but also that earlier support, and Chris's team are looking at doing that, and we're doing that frankly in a high support, high challenge way. And back to our relational work with schools, I think we had to earn some stripes about getting ourselves back into that space and improving our services, but through Chris's leadership and others in Chris's team, we're now in that space and need to do more together.
Thank you. There's a constant theme of trust building, and that's really lovely to hear. Richard wants to come back, and then I'll go to David.
Yes, I mean, just to add a little, the things that I have taken out of this as well. One thing that was mentioned, and I think you picked up on, was that alternative provision. It's the first time that I've heard it mentioned that it's not a destination. And I think that is something we all need to focus on, because when alternative provision is looked at as a destination, that affects, well, you're there and that's where you stay. It also therefore affects the quality of what the young person is going to get, if it is something which is put in place whilst we look at another way to take back to using the word mainstream. I think, you know, there's lots of different types of mainstream, aren't they? Will affect the quality and also what the purpose of it is, because coming back to what was said, you know, young people need to feel that they're in their place with people that they care about and trust, and that's the whole process, isn't it?
Yeah, they simply need to be in the right place, regardless of whatever the label is attached to it. David, over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to follow on from what Richard just said, though, actually, because I agree it shouldn't be a destination. Sharon's point points around earning the stripes, trust building, honest conversations with schools. But again, echoing Emily's points, cultures in schools will really vary. And we've heard a lot about isolations, high control settings, sheer numbers of exclusions, suspensions that often will proportionately, clearly fall on our young people with SEND needs. And I guess the aim should be that inclusion to me, and I spoke about this earlier on, around inclusion to me is being part of something, being part of your community, your local community, ideally where you're not having to travel long distances at cost to parents' time, funds, family dynamics, or council funds, expenditure, budget, all that sort of stuff that comes with it. And I know you talked about working proactively with head teacher forums. That transparency in reporting, I think, is really key. The data for all to see, I think, is really important, because I can tell you, well, as I'm sure you'll be aware, some schools will certainly feel they are doing more than maybe others. And that's got to stop, that's got to change. I think everyone's got to take responsibility for keeping inclusion of their people, young people in their communities. So are there any other levers outside of what we're already trying to do? That's the thing, you get these saying, the levers and silos, all these things you come out of being these phrases you learn when you become a counsellor, and you have to get out your brain and use them in normal day life. But are there any other levers that can be pulled, any outside the box thinking that we can try and motivate our schools not to give up on? I'm not saying they all do, okay, I don't want to make that sweeping statement, but anything else we can try and do to motivate our schools to really try and keep our most vulnerable young people in their local school?
I think one of the levers that comes for us and will come along soon for us is actually something that will be a national lever, which is around the reframing of the Ofsted report card, and how schools will be rated and judged and reported on. I think that increased emphasis around inclusion within that process will actually be a really important tool for local authorities to be able to have that conversation and move things along. So I think we'll have that as something that will support us in that element of it. I think what we've got to be is system leader, though, in terms of where we are with things, and really be in that position to drive things forwards and be relentless as a council in our viewpoint and our morality around the situation. I don't think we were in that position locally previously. I think, as Sharon has alluded to, we are more in that position now to be able to have those conversations. And I think the other element that sits alongside that is then the peer challenge as well. And what we haven't previously had is other schools willing to speak out and put that position out there and almost start to call out the schools that they feel aren't playing that equal role with things. I think from our experience, certainly while I've been here this year, that is a growing instance now, where the schools are much more prepared to say, we're not prepared to be one of the few that make these adaptations and become inclusive. This is a system-wide element that we need to pull together on. We're seeing that more and more in the conversations that we have with our head teachers in our schools. So I think it's a combination of the elements together that we do, and that we don't lose sight of this is where our priority is and where we're aiming for. That, you know, these committee meetings, obviously a highlight of that is around our SEND team and our EHC elements, but that is part of this graduated approach to meeting need. We've got to keep that focus on that early intervention, that graduated support, what schools are expected to provide from their ordinarily available provision. And I think through doing that and having a system-wide accountability, that alongside those national developments, and we can only see again what may come from government over the coming months as well, we need to pull all of that together. We apply that consistently moving forwards.
Thanks, Chris, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor, Peter.
There's a kind of gap in my knowledge here, but I'm working with a family at the moment that took a school, I shan't name schools or whatever, to a tribunal over how their child had been not educated, if you like, SEND child, couldn't even hold a pen, had a lot of potential before they went into the school. They were supported by the the complaints people, but what came out of it for the parents, and they're both very articulate, both teachers, and said that there was no system of enforcement. So if a school was deemed, or a teacher or an individual class was deemed that the child was put in a class and they were ignored, or they were put to the back of the class, or they weren't paid attention to in terms of their need, that we might, as an authority, make a decision and say, well, that's not right. You've not done that child right, whatever the legislation or language is. But then they came out saying, well, there's no real enforcement mechanism. And I just wonder what we can do. It reminds me a little bit like the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and we haven't got anybody to enforce them. So people drive fast all the time. So, and I found that quite upsetting because I do know the child. He lives in my, and it's very sad to see him go down because he was promised to be taught and he didn't. So how can we improve that potential to enforce when we see that things are not right within the school?
I think what we have to do with this now is adapt as a council and a local authority in terms of our position and where we are now, because times have changed from 20 years ago where schools were all maintained and under the council's banner in that way for enforcement. We're obviously in a different time and context now where we have the multi-academy trusts, a great deal more standalone academies, and a much smaller number of maintained schools that we retain that sort of direct influence over. So our approach needs to change, in my view, from that almost controlling approach that we do have that limited influence around, to building that relational approach with our multi-academy trusts and standalone academies as well, so that we can pull together a much stronger partnership in relation to that. Some of that is for those trusts is seeing what you know, how do they benefit from that, what are the recognitions that they gain from that as well. And I think it is about redefining our relationship with them in terms of how we do that. Many of these multi-academy trusts are national. They are huge entities in their own right now, spanning multiple schools. They have their own infrastructures, they have their own HR teams, their own school improvement teams, quality teams. And for us, I think it's a point, not just for BCP, but I think nationally, where that relationship needs to be redefined in terms of how that pulls together. And I think part of that is what Sharon said before around that school improvement board and that education improvement board, and actually having that stronger relational approach where we see ourselves as a system together and not separate entities trying to pull in different directions. And I don't know if Sharon wants to come in on that one as well at all with her own view.
Yeah, just to say that we obviously have, as a system, now we're truly in that systems leadership space, have conversations with DfE about this dynamic. And as Chris says, it's not unique to our local area, but it is obviously a concern to us. So part of that education improvement board or partnership board, we will seek to have DfE representation on that board. So and I know that Kathy and myself both worked in previous areas where we have had that in place and it has worked well. So as much as we can, we will apply to using the colleagues' words, the levers that are in place to put that influence and shape the discussions in that space. And again, there's lots of links to tonight's meeting, but that information sharing agreement, which we are pushing with schools, is a key turning point really for us, or turning point for us as a system. And as Chris has said, we've absolutely agitated. We had an education conference, which I can't remember if we shared at the previous committee, on the 27th of June, and we shared the data. It was anonymised because we don't have the permission to share that, but we gave profile of different schools in different settings and their distribution and support of SEND, both in that SEND support space and in EHCP. So we're absolutely in that influencing place, and we would expect the DfE to be part of that education partnership board to help provide the oversight and clarity and challenge where we need it, but understanding across the broader piece. One final thing is the education inclusion belonging strategy is absolutely to the point. Forgive me, I think it's Neil, in terms of that we want our children to be in their local communities, to be walking to school with the children that they play inside and outside of school with, and not being unable to access. So again, really pulling all these strands together, launching through that education partnership board and having a full systems response to what is a significant issue, notwithstanding the changes in the Ofsted system.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive now.
Yeah, just a quick one. So obviously we have the relationships with the schools in the local area, and a lot of what we've spoken today has been about building those relationships with schools in the local area. I was just wondering how it works when there are schools across boundaries in Dorset. So, you know, lots of kids in Hamworthy might go to Litchett, lots of kids in Merley might go to QE. Do you do the relationships with the schools based on where students that live in BCP live, or do you do the relationships based on the schools being in or outside of the BCP area, or is it a combination of both?
I think in terms of systems and local systems, the way that the local systems are set up is, for example, our head teacher forums and those networks are based on the BCP schools themselves. So when we're doing system-wide elements, it captures the BCP schools. Beyond that, though, if we have children who are attending out of area in some of those other local authority schools, there's combination of methods of how we would start to pull those schools in. Obviously, their priority is working with their local authority and how their systems might work there. But we would, if it was an individual child that we needed to, we would have that discussion and positive conversation and challenge with that school separately over those particular situations. But equally, both very locally in terms of those neighbouring councils, but also as a Southwest region, we have ties to make sure that we are linking together there. There are SEND forums that link across all of the Southwest councils so that we can work together and work on the priorities together, and cross-border issues is one of those areas that are discussed there. And equally as well, the equivalents of Cathy and the other areas as well come together to discuss things at that strategic level. So whilst our work day to day is focused on the BCP schools, there is that wider strategic and linkage work that does go on into the other areas as well to pull that together.
Just a quick follow-up. Would it be considered somewhat of a faux pas to invite the head teachers of schools that are on that boundary area along to the head teachers forum for BCP? Or would we have kind of no reason to do so?
Some of those, some of it will happen by default. Some of them will be part of academy trusts that reach across that system. So that it will happen to a lesser or greater extent, thinking about our distribution of academy trusts in the system. It isn't something we've sought to do, but both Tanya and myself do link with our peer colleagues in the other areas where we have issues of concern and or discussion, as Chris talked about as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Olivia.
I just again want to echo all my colleagues in, you know, the discussion about how upsetting the discussion from children was, but also, you know, I feel again when we're talking about having all our stakeholders involved, I'd really like to hear from council officers who, you know, the barriers they face to all of this, teachers, head teachers, you know, because it's an overarching thing. And as a teacher, my role as a teacher has changed immeasurably from 20 years ago, as you discussed earlier, Chris. And what concerns me is the main driver of this, and what I can see the change in what's called it's that mental health. It's the mental health of the children, the teachers, everybody involved in this kind of area that is suffering. And it seems to be growing, and our YPs are even thinking about it. So for me, because that is changing, is there something, I mean, and it's a national issue, you know, we know it is there something that as a council we are looking into in that route for our mental health of our young children, you know, especially these ones who are vulnerable, who are most likely to be in AP, and their families? Is that something that we are looking into as a council to, you know, make it more of a focus so we can perhaps be more, you know, not curative, preventative, you know, stop us from getting to where we're going in that sense? That's quite a wide question, sorry.
No, thanks, Olivia. Yeah, I think that there's again a couple of points of response to it. I think, sorry.
Just to let you know, Cathy wanted to come in, but I don't know which order to go in. I'm
I'll
going to
go with Cathy first. I will defer to Cathy. That's
I thought you might say that.
Just to say that we have been working with our ICS colleagues in terms of that mental health transformation work. And only today we were looking with them about that offer right at the beginning, early years through school, and that kind of range of need and how we do that collectively and how we do that together through the school system and meet need. And I know there are a number of programmes that are already within schools that are supporting that, but we are looking at how we do that and how we do that collectively through our system in terms of multi-agency teams and things like that, because you're absolutely right. It's a national issue, but it's something we need to address with our colleagues as well.
I nearly asked Chris if he was happy with that answer. I'm joking. Right. Do I have any more comments or questions on this item? Sandra, I think this is going to have to be the last one.
It will be. Okay. Magic wand. We do magic wand. I hear nationally, but as BCP, being a very large local authority, what can we do for our residents, for our children, for our parents, for our schools that could be groundbreaking, could be we could be looked at as a council that gets what's going on and moves with it?
Again, I'm actually wondering if I should almost go to Sharon or Kathy for that rather than poor Chris, but I don't know. Chris is smiling.
So
Kathy,
come on.
I think through the journey, the improvement journey that we've been on, and the corporate council support and stakeholders, and also our partners, there are always opportunities to look at doing things differently. And I think it almost goes back to something that John was saying, because when we think about doing something groundbreaking, everybody thinks about, we'll need some money. Can't do it unless we got some money. In actual fact, I always have the mantra of we could do something differently. And how do we do something differently or collectively? So even the conversation with health colleagues today was, well, actually, if we all work together, what are the efficiencies that we would have from that? Can we evidence that we will make efficiencies, which then we could put a bid in for some funding to support the development? So there's always opportunities. I think what we have to do sometimes is to get the foundations right. Get the foundations right, make sure they're very strong, and from that we will build. So yes, we can look at innovation, but it's also about making sure that our foundations are strong enough on which to build that.
Yeah,
very quickly.
Yeah, it's like setting out your expectations, and those that fail to deliver on your expectations, then not necessarily forfeit, but like I say, it is that trust. I don't believe building trust would cost financial implications. It is that collective communication.
All right, and on that harmonious note, I bring this section to an end. I'm very, very conscious of time. I'm also very conscious that we have a work plan item that is going to take some time, unfortunately. So I think I'm going to suggest a short break. I'd like to do the information items. Oh, I've done the recommendation. I've forgotten the recommendation again. I'm so sorry. Shoot me. So the recommendation is that the report is received as evidence of the work currently being undertaken across the wider partnership within BCP to secure improvement, thank you, and transformation across alternative provision to support mainstream inclusion and contribute towards a sustainable SEND system and positively impact the trajectory of high needs expenditure. I don't know if anyone has any comment on that recommendation, if we're happy to accept that recommendation. Are we happy to accept that recommendation? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to cover off the information only items so that if there were any questions, we still have people in the room who we might be able to. Thank you, Chris. Sorry. Thank you, Chris. He's gone. Please thank him for me. Oh, no, he's still there. Right, bye. So that if there are any questions, they can be dealt with, and then perhaps we could also let Sharon go. I'm not completely sure what your arrangement is, but so the information items are the school attainment and progress and co-production of pathway. and the ever-present high needs school grant expenditure forecast paper. Does anybody have anything they need to raise on either of those? Bless you, thank you. Right. Richard, can I make you wait? Thank you. In that case, I'm proposing a 10-minute break, and we will come back and hopefully we can wrap up as quickly as possible, if that's okay with the committee. Thank you. So thank you very much for that, allowing us a short break. We come back to the meeting and it is over to Richard as the portfolio holder for his update, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So to start with, I will talk about the Children's Services over the Scrutiny Committee recommendations to Cabinet. You did mention that earlier on, and it will also help with the action sheet work that you're going to do. So the Education Improvement Service have attended and had Dorset meetings of the PCC around knife crime and drug and alcohol use. The area of focus has been on PSHE curriculum. Through these meetings, we have asked the police and community groups that go into schools for a list of work they've done with schools around knife crime, but it's been hard to build up a picture on a school-by-school curriculum basis because the list the police and community groups keep don't always say what has been delivered, it's just that they've been there. There has been a survey of schools regarding drug and alcohol use, but unfortunately very few schools have yet responded to the survey. Current recommendations from Ofsted around knife crime is that school leaders should consider how their personal, social and health and economic education, PSHE to you and me, curriculum reflects local safeguarding issues and trends, including knife crime. In reality, so much is expected to fit into the PSHE curriculum that knife crime will likely be delivered as a one-off session or stroke standalone lesson stroke assembly. I've been doing some research about what materials already exist regarding the uses in schools. There's a lot of free resources, many of which is good. I think I mentioned the DFE website previously, and there are other resources too. I can share some of these with members of the committee if they are interested. I've also had a conversation with one of the PSHE resource providers who was attending the recent SACRI conference. So I'm going to get some of their material and then look at that. And that's another update. I'm now chairing the BCP SACRI, that's the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education Committee. Hopefully not for too long, it's just until somebody else beds into to doing that job. Looking at the other recommendations around the age appropriate education be implemented, we also need to understand what is already being done. The national advice indicates that this should be discussed at junior as well as senior school levels, which translates to Key Stage 3 upwards basically. And I'm finding out what we are aware of in primary schools. In reality, it's likely that the work mainly happens in secondary schools as standalone lessons, as I said earlier on. Looking at the messages that we are sent out through our own social workers and youth services, information has gone out to schools, include the Ben Kienzler Trust webinar, and some of this year there were changes are made at the community event, the community event called Changes Are Made. Further information has also been sent out via the Team Safeguarding newsletter. Then there are other campaigns that we work alongside, as highlighted earlier, the Youth Parliament campaign, particularly with Ryan, because that was one of his campaigns. And I know that work is going on around this, and I'll leave it to the Youth Parliament to feedback into there. And we also have the Lives Before Knives stroke Changes Are Made campaigns too. Another update is we've now just appointed a new Director of Education. I'm going to hand over in a minute to Kathy just to give a bit more detail because it's only just happened. But Sharon will be here a little longer, so she will be here attending the next meeting. So I know you want to say goodbye, and it's a smooth handover. I have one extra bit to add after Kathy said, so I'll just pass over to Kathy just to.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Thank you, Chair. Just to say that we have, I'm really delighted to announce that we have Lisa Linscott joining BCP Council as the Director of Education and Skills. She'll be joining us in February. Lisa went through a really stringent appointment panels and interview process, of which Councillor Carr-Brown and Councillor Burton were part of that process, as were some head teacher representation. Lisa has, through her work in that interview process and her written submissions, shows a massive commitment to the education and education equity for all children across the system, with such a focus on inclusion and maximising every child's potential, which I know we've discussed today and is extremely important to us all. She has got quite extensive experience transforming services, and she has served as a Director of Education at Plymouth City Council and also senior education role at Dorset Council. Lisa has been living in the BCP area for the last 20 years and has worked in a number of leadership roles within secondary schools. And so she really does understand the landscape of the schools and the landscape of BCP as it sits. And so I'm really delighted that Lisa is going to join us, and I know we'll all support her as she moves into her role. And I know she's keen to pick up the baton with the improvement work, so that we continue at pace and there is no dip in that work. And so Sharon will be supporting that induction to make that smooth transition.
Thank you. As I understand it, Sharon is pretty much working up to the point at which Lisa comes in, so there isn't this sort of gap that sometimes happens at this level.
Absolutely, and Sharon and Lisa have known each other, and also there will be hopefully some what we would call keep in touch days between Sharon going and Lisa starting.
Thank you very much. Richard, back to you. Thank you.
So my final bit is, as we've heard, Ofsted are coming. They're going to do a full ILACS, inspecting local authority children's services. As I say that they're coming, they're actually here virtually anyway. I would say, and I do know a few Ofsted inspectors and HMI, that they're all great people. And of course they may well be watching this meeting. I've got my interview on Thursday. The views on Ofsted are, I know there's lots of different views on Ofsted, but I just to refresh myself, I looked at the purpose of the inspection. It says focus on things that matter most to children's lives. So I think we need to keep that in our mind, be consistent in their expectations, providers, and prioritise the work, our work, where improvement is needed most. Children's services officers are actually, believe it or not, relieved, because I know they've been waiting. It was September where it was the first date that the phone call was expected, and they have been waiting and preparing, and I think it's been quite stressful, the wait and preparation. It is a big deal, not just for children's services but for the whole council. It is, the reputation of the council, the amount of money the council spend. It is, children's services often is overlooked by a lot of people, but it is core of what we do. And I would say that it is a huge amount of work for the children's services officers. John mentioned it earlier on, and I'll just support that. Please bear that in mind, and if you see them passing in the corridor, give them a cake or a cup of coffee or something, and go there, pat them on the head and send them on the way and wish them luck. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure what to say to that. Do we have any questions or comments for Richard? Peter.
Richard, thank you for that. I'm really interested in the, because as a youth worker, we used to go into schools and do lots of information about what we called sex, drugs and rock and roll in those days. But people knew what we were doing. We had lesson plans, and we worked with schools and stuff. And it was interesting when you said that you didn't know what the police did when they went in. I think it would be really interesting to find out what they actually do, what their lesson plans are, and how they can be utilised in other areas of where we reach out to young people.
I would totally agree. Sex, drugs and rock and roll is a quote from Ian Jury. I don't know if you realise that. I also have an interest because one of my roles in the past, I was actually PSHE coordinator at a secondary school, and therefore I do have quite an understanding. And you're right, when I was doing it, I'd want to see what was going to be delivered before it was delivered. So it is an interesting question, and it's one which is also on my mind.
Thank you, Olivia.
I have been speaking to the head of the school in my ward, because we go in, and they have the Benkin Cellar Trust go in. They've had them this term, and they've had a parents' evening for the parents to go in and see it as well. But I know when we went to the the knife crime event in Bournemouth, but Cameron's grandma is really, you know, she really wants to kind of get into to be involved in that as well, because she feels really passionately about the education of children too. So she was really vocal about wanting to be a part of that too. So perhaps that's something we could, you know, speak with her about with lived experience.
Yes, again, I would agree. I mean, I do totally understand that a lot of work is being done in schools, but of course the difficulty is gathering into one place. Because that's what was sort of asked, wasn't it? It is gathering, so we have the assurance that it is going on. We need to ask the schools what they're doing, and of course, and we need to see that if that question is going to be answered. Sorry,
could I just very quickly ask, Olivia, is that a senior or a primary school that you have?
It's a senior school, yeah.
And David had a comment, I believe.
Thanks, Richard. And just to say good luck for the next duration of the inspection. And Kathy, I'm not sure, I don't know if you're too well at the moment. You seem to be, I can see Toby sort of positioning himself slightly away from you. Yeah, just good luck. And I hope that we get the outcome that you know, is fair and deserved. Yeah.
Let's all second them.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
I think this committee could send its best wishes to the service, and you know, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, any other comments for Richard? Right, thank you. That concludes that part of the meeting, and Lindsay has appeared as if by magic to steer us through the work plan, which is actually, I'm afraid there is a bit of work to do here. So let's get into it quickly. Lindsay, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and take you through as quickly as I can. If I just take you back to the statement raised earlier in the meeting, just to clarify that any statements made by the public in meetings, there isn't any debate allowed on those in the meeting. But given it was a suggestion for your work plan, perhaps the committee might like to ask you to go away, Chair, and find some background information to ascertain if that would be a suitable, impactful topic to add to your work plan.
Is the committee happy for me to do that by email? Yeah. I.e. go and find some information and communicate with the committee via email? Yeah. Thank you. I will do that.
Lovely. Thank you. Shall I continue, Chair?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I wanted you to continue. Apologies.
That's okay. So in terms of your actual work plan, if we go through that now, please look at the Appendix B dated 21st of November, not the earlier one. This was circulated as a supplementary to the committee because officers were able to plot in some of your priorities. So just to recap, you held your work planning workshop. We surveyed members on their priority areas. Arising from that, we've now worked with officers in the service to plot in suitable times for those to be received by committee, and they are now set out in your work plan. So that is the draft work plan. You're being asked to consider it, amend it, approve it as you see fit. Just to say that the priorities have been able to be slotted in up to about March. After that, you'll see that you have quite a lot of capacity. I think that's a really good thing. It gives you flexibility to bring in arising items or cabinet items. And any suggestions that weren't highlighted by the committee as your priorities, they haven't been lost. They remain in the dates to be allocated list. So you can still bring those back through when you're ready to. Likewise, you have a number of working group suggestions that are listed, which you can move to when you're ready to. You've already identified that Family Hubs is going to be your next priority working group, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So I think I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or if you're happy to approve the work plan as it's been drafted.
I think my question to the committee would be, to my reading, it feels like there are some things that still need to be assigned. They need to be slotted in more detail, or am I misreading this?
Chair, I believe that the top priorities that came out of the survey to committee have been slotted in by Democratic Services in consultation with children's services officers. And then there is still more room to slot more things in later in the year.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Sorry, I slightly hogged the question there.
Can
Emily.
I just check? Oh, sorry, thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the right pages, so it's page 213 is Appendix B, isn't it? Because then the next meeting.
No, we have a separate paper that is just the work plan.
Thank you.
I've something to add as well, that I believe the sufficiency strategy is, oh no, it's there. I'm so sorry, it is there. Ignore me. Can I, no, it's in January. I apologise. Ignore me.
Sorry, just to say, sufficiency in terms of for schools capacity or sufficiency for children's placements, children.
Yes, that was actually one of my questions. I believe there is more than one sufficiency strategy. So this is the children in care one is already inserted for January, but the school places sufficiency strategy that you're just referring to. What's the timeline on that, please? Do you know?
I'd have to check with officers, but I would think after that one, the first one.
Yeah. So that could perhaps be something nearer the summer. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Would you say that the belonging strategy is something that should be coming here? Do you have an idea of timeline on that, please?
Again, I would say in the summer.
Thank you. Right, any other comments or questions on this? Olivia.
I'm assuming we'll probably most likely be discussing the result of the ILACs in the next, and it will that'll be slotted in when, as and when, kind of January time. I've assumed that would be the January meeting.
I was assuming that the ILACs would end up being the pre-decision or reactive scrutiny for January. Will we have enough information by then?
If I may, Chair, if we remember of the last Ofsted 2021, the final report and outcome didn't arrive to us until February. And so I haven't been given the date for the publication, etc., of the report this time round. The inspector didn't have that information when I spoke to them yesterday, but they did say to me that obviously Christmas and New Year takes up that time, and so it may or may not be available. We may be able to present a flavour of findings, but we may not be able to deliver the final judgment.
Oliver.
Just there's a few of these where I think we could probably invite some people from outside bodies. Obviously, they don't have to turn up because they're not mandatory. But things like the CAMS transformation update, inviting some people along from Dorset CAMS might be worthwhile doing rather than keeping it entirely in house. We also have the knife crime piece, and we've mentioned a few times in here. Cam's grandmother, that she's interested in potentially getting more involved. Maybe we can invite her or people that she's working with in knife crime. I often find that we do tend to keep everything quite in-house, and it'd be quite nice to get some outside bodies in, not just to participate in presentations, but also it'd be good to get them in to help scrutinise things, because these are the experts. And I've seen it in other ONS committees where we've invited in specific experts and allowed them to ask questions. I disagree with who we invited, but but I think it might be for later on. But
no, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I'm not sure if we could necessarily say that this person would want to do that particular thing, but yes, making the invitation definitely. And also on the CAMS thing, I mean, I am hopeful, as I said earlier, that we'll get some ICB representation, or it might be that Dorset Healthcare University want to take on that that particular item. So no, I think that's a really good suggestion. Thank you. Olivia, are you signalling? You're not signalling. Okay. Right. I had a thought going through my head and it has gone for a little walk. So somebody else speak while I try and remember what it was. I know that you want to come on, Lindsay, I know that you want to come on to the working groups. So it seems that we're happy with where we are at the moment with those items. We'll talk about the informal briefings later. Is that right, Lindsay?
That's just another agreement I'd like to get from you tonight, if I could. You said in your workshop that you'd like to hold informal briefings. Generally, it's better to put in a programme of those to be held on sort of alternate months from your meetings and then use them or cancel them as appropriate. So I'd just like formal agreement that the committee would be happy for us to set those up.
I'm getting some nods. Sorry, Olivia has a question, apology.
Yeah, just we've been, would that be instead of the pre-meet or is that more different?
No, it's literally on the off month, as it were, where we don't have a meeting.
Would they be online? I'm just thinking about childcare and other committee. And
Lindsay is nodding furiously.
Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, I can do that.
I mean, the thing that came to my mind, for example, is we've got the wellbeing bill going into Parliament, and there may be stuff in there that would be instructive to us as a committee, but also to any councillor. I know that other ONS has opened those up to other councillors. I'd be very interested to do that myself. That would be my suggestion. So things like that. So I'll take that as agreement. Thank you. I think actually that might have been my thought. So I don't think I've formally asked, do we have agreement on the current plan as it's presented here? Thank you. We do have agreement. Lindsay, you would like to talk, sorry, Lindsay, you would like to talk about, it's gone out of my head. I'm really sorry. I'm full of cold. Working
Family
groups.
hubs, Chair.
Family hubs first. So we need some membership.
Yeah, so in order, I know that this is the next priority for the committee. You've already agreed to that. Councillor Brown submitted this request and it's appended again at Appendix E as a reference. So to get this moving, I'd like to ask if there is any interest in membership from among the committee that you want to put forward tonight, and it may be an idea for you to delegate to you as chair to agree the final membership and allow anyone not present to express an interest. So if I just pause there around the membership, and then if you come back to me around the areas of inquiry.
Thank you. So yes, could we have an expression of interest for the people who are in the room? Thank you. We have Emily, Olivia and Sandra. I am conscious that we have people missing from the committee, so I should open that up. I think probably we wouldn't want more than one more person, is that correct? Although if we do have two people, then I can make a decision. Would you say, what size working group would you say was optimum?
Normally 3 to 5 members is about right.
All right, thank you. So, Olivia?
Not that I don't want these two lovely ladies to be on it, but I'm just conscious that we're all from the same party. Not that that should matter. Just maybe there needs to be some cross-party, and all women as well, but cross-party. I'm sure it's fine, but I just want to make a note of that.
And I'll just say, yeah, I'm more than happy to be involved, but I would, as I say, the councillor's not here as well. So, and I was part of the last working group as well. So here if needed. Yeah, of course. Yeah, sharing is caring and all that. So yeah, but here if needed.
I'm sure we can spread the love, and indeed we can spread it cross-party, and we can spread it across genders. As well, let's see who comes forward, and we'll take it from there. If the committee is happy to delegate the final decision to me based on the 3 people I already have, is that all right? Thank you. That helps us make progress. Lindsay, do you need anything else on that at the moment?
Yeah, just in terms of the scope, Chair, Councillor Brown set out what she wanted to achieve from that working group, and then the officers very helpfully put out a scope based on gathering evidence from a range of stakeholders through some visits and visit to the family hubs. So I think that's a really helpful format and allows you to gather evidence from different people. That certainly speaks to good scrutiny. I wanted to see whether the committee is happy to proceed with that sort of approach and then delegate to the membership, once it has been agreed, to flesh out the key lines of inquiry and the things that they would be looking to gain from those visits.
Any comments or questions on that proposal? Do we agree it? Thank you. I'm overwhelmed with nods. So that's agreed. Lindsay, where would you like to go next with this?
Thank you. Last thing, I think, Chair. Budget working group recommendations. They are appended at Appendix F. They are 3 suggestions for joining a work plan. Now, when the working group looked at these, they didn't look at it in conjunction with your work plan as drafted, so there is some duplication. So what I'm asking is whether the committee is happy to agree to those 3 suggestions, and where they do link with other things already on there, we would make a note and join them together on the work plan. And excuse me, Chair, I should also add that I ought to have circulated the full findings to the committee, because obviously these are in isolation and the full findings went to ONS board. So we will do that after this meeting, because it's important that the committee is aware of everything that was explored.
I'm sorry, I've just had a moment. I don't know what you mean by full findings. Help me out, sorry.
The recommendations arising from your budget working group are just provided with just 3 recommendations, not the rest of the information.
I see what you mean. Apologies. Yes, I had a little bit of a moment. Right. Yes, so essentially the first 2 are already accounted for. The budget's been done, Family Hubs is agreed and is going forward. Do we have a timeline? I'm just thinking about the timeline on the Family Hubs, because we're conscious that we can only do these consecutively. And we should start to prepare the next one, as it were, whilst perhaps one is going on, just in terms of thinking about it. I'm not talking about doing any work as such. So when would you anticipate Family Hubs reporting?
I think that's really dependent upon the visits and when they can be established based on the format that's been set out in that outline. So we really need to liaise with children's services officers and the Family Hubs themselves to see when they could be scheduled in. But I think it's reasonable to complete the scoping and the membership this side of Christmas, and then start the work in the new year. Your next meeting's in January, so I think you could have an update report sharing the confirmed key lines of inquiry to you, and then reporting after that.
Marvellous, thank you. That's what I was hoping you were going to say. Thank you. Right, so yes, you've proposed, I'm sorry, I think I'm actually now quite tired and not completely well. Could you just go back over what your proposal was around the working groups for me, for the committee, and then we can agree it or not?
Do you mean in terms of the Family Hubs working group or the budget?
No, my apologies. You said about how working in the others into the timeline as and when. Sorry, if they married up with other items on the agenda, if we wanted to take that approach, have I understood you?
Are you talking about budget working groups, Chair?
Yeah, no, I think I really am now. I'm not actually very well, and I think I really have got to the end of my my tether on this. So, do we accept the budget working groups as they are? Lindsay, do you need anything else on this at the moment?
No,
in that case, I will stop digging.
Fine. That's fine.
Apologies, everyone. Right. And we do have the informal briefing sessions that we need to think about. I've made one suggestion around the wellbeing bill, but presumably there could be other things that actually as subjects are already in this work plan list that could be used for those briefing sessions as well. Do you have a proposal for how we work that through?
I think the committee should see the briefing sessions as a tool to help them prepare for the impactful scrutiny that you want to do within your committee meetings. So as you move along your work, anything that's clearly going to be more information giving or anything that you think will help to inform you in your work could be plotted into your briefing sessions. And I think those will arise naturally through your meetings and your preparation, but you can use them in diverse ways. For example, when you come to work planning again, you could ask your portfolio holder to come and speak to you about his forthcoming priorities so that you have a really good discussion around that. So they are there for you to use as a tool.
Thank you. So at this moment, all we need to do really is ask Democratic Services to find us some dates, put them in the diary, and then we will decide what happens. Okay. Everyone happy with that approach? Thank you. Thank you. Right. Lindsay, is that concluded?
That's concluded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, everybody. Apologies for my little brain loss moment. No, indeed. I appreciate that. Thank you for the solidarity. Well, I know. Right. Yes, we do still just have the I did just want to wrap up a little bit on what the submission to the cabinet on the working group, on the budget working group. I did ask my colleagues earlier who were on there with me if they had any reflections they wanted to add, and I think David was happy to say something. No.
Now it's my turn to have a bit of a no, just thanks to all that were involved. A pleasure to be a part of it, albeit half of it due to some conflicting for one of the meetings, but it was good to see how the job that you did, Chair, which was stellar in terms of positioning and engaging during the ONS session itself, and I thought it was well received. And as Councillor Cooper talked about, in a myriad of issues, and we can only scratch the surface on it, but I felt there's a good bit of work that was put in by those involved. So thank you.
Thank you, and I wanted to thank the rest of the committee and also Children's Services for the support they gave us, and Democratic Services for that matter. It was a big piece of work. It was a sort of new frontier, I think, for all the ONS groups. But as we hadn't yet done any working group work either, it was we sort of broke into that area as well. And I think actually it was really rewarding. It was well received. It was of use. And I think that's what we needed to get from it to give us confidence to go forward. So great. Thank you very much for everybody's contributions. In that case, and if anyone has anything else they want to add or say, I'm really hoping the answer is no. Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper. Oh,
Lindsay, I was just saying thank you for your hard work, because it was like herding cats at times. So, and introducing us to your dog. It was a very lovely animal.
No, eternal thanks to you, Lindsay. You guide us very well indeed. And thank you to Sinead as well. In that case, we will reconvene at the end of January. We may have an informal briefing between now and then. We'll wait and see what dates come through. Thank you very much for your attendance and your input. It's been, I think, actually a very good meeting despite its length, and I apologise for that. We do need to try and get them shorter. However, I think everything that was said was necessary. In that case, I close the meeting. Thank you. Good night.